This video is one of the most thorough, comprehensive videos on launching your six-figure tech sales career on YouTube. You're going to learn how to break into tech sales, from finding the right companies to apply to, how to tweak your resume and LinkedIn profile to tailor it for tech sales, how to network to earn interviews, and how to be an incredible interviewer that stands out in a competitive market to land your tech sales dream job. In this video, you're going to learn from the best of the best, like Kyle Coleman, who's hired over 200 SDRs, Kim Brown, who's a VP of sales development that's interviewed and hired many SDRs as well, Connor Murray, who's hired and trained SDRs at Oracle, Kaylin Wright, who's a former VP of sales turned recruiter and talent advisor to many SaaS companies, and real-world account executives that you might have heard of like Trent Dressel, JC Pollard, and Eric Finch of Higher Levels, who broke into tech sales as SDRs, got promoted, and now help many aspiring SDRs break into tech sales. Tech sales is an amazing career path. It's life-changing. You can make as much or more than doctors and lawyers without having to cut anyone open or work ungodly hours. And man, can you build a lot of meaningful connections and unlock personal transformation and a ton of self-development along the way. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button, share it with more people who could benefit from the message, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more videos like these committed to helping people launch their tech sales career. And if you guys are serious about breaking into tech sales and launching your six-figure tech sales career in 12 weeks, then check out my collection of courses, Tech Sales Accelerator, linked in the description of this video. And if you really want to understand if it's a good fit for you or not, you can book time with me for a discovery call, also linked in the description of this video. I'd love to chat with you. All right, let's dig into it and give you the blueprint to break into tech sales at a great company to launch your six-figure career.
Like, you were making $8 an hour at Sears, like in retail. Was that accurate?
It amounted to that. It was actually $4.50 an hour plus commission. And it was
okay, making the big bucks. And so just the before and the after, this guy gets into tech sales, and I correct me if I'm right, something like 1.63 million in a year. Like, that's unbelievable. That's even possible. People seeing you do that, like just by seeing you do it, that means that they are capable of it.
Anyone can get into tech sales, no matter where you're coming from, no matter what age you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what your name is. So you must believe in that. That is a fundamental truth. Once you get to that point and you realize I can do it too, and this is what I want, which you must believe you can do it, and you must want it. You must be committed to seeing it through.
I'm with you. I think it's always a good time to get into tech. I think like even the ups and downs that are coming, like that's always going to be there. It's always going to be there. It's like, it's never going to change. Like, even like our company did layoffs, you know, like, but it's life, it's business. So we carry on and pay it forward. I would also say I've struggled with this. It's easier to say it to other people, but I'm actively doing it right now. Like, it's sometimes when you're so close to it, like moving from medical to tech, like it seems like such a big thing and it's hard to get over that. The reality is, just like trying to be just real, and I'm not in your situation, you could move to tech in like a couple of years from now. I don't think you'll hate it, but like you could, and you could go back to medical. Like, what's a couple of years of your life experiencing something? You might fall in love with it. You can always go back. Like, it's not like these things are permanent.
What is the purpose of the SDR role? And I want to see this through the lens of a VP, like an executive. What's the purpose? And then after that, how is success measured? What are the KPIs?
Yeah. Great question. I'll try to not use too much like tech lingo and jargon to like for the everyday person to understand, but an SDR, it's your job to find potential business for your company. You're supposed to find people that fit usually the company's like ideal client, who we think will probably find value in our product, can solve the problems that they have, and engage in conversation with them, evangelize the product, get them kind of excited. Sometimes SDRs are going to get inbound leads, so people that might already be interested or have a vague interest, but an SDR's job is to like evangelize the product. Actually, we're talking about like tech evangelism. It's like that. And ideally generating interest, not just capturing it, but like getting people excited about something that you're excited about. I've said it earlier, just a few minutes ago, people are always buying something. They're buying technology everywhere. And there's like not a whole lot of differentiators in products these days when they're looking for specific things. And so why not buy from you? The only difference between this person like needing to solve their problem with your product versus someone else's is the power of your conversation. So an SDR's job is to make cold calls, warm calls, email calls, social touches, trying to talk to real people about problems they have and selling your product to them. It's working with a lot of people in marketing. It's working with people that close deals every day, account executives, some things that like to make them successful. And Chris, feel free to like poke at me if I'm like being too general or generic. But
It's really great. So keep going.
Good. What makes a successful SDR? Not being afraid to pick up the phone. There's a lot of back and forth for years and years on like, is cold calling still a thing? Is it still real? Yes, it is. It's still real. I make a point to take a cold call at least once a month, just for good measure, to make sure I know what's going on. Yeah, the people that I pick up for are the ones that multi-thread me, that are hitting me up on LinkedIn, email, phone, commenting on my posts. So the people that earn it. So just a little tip out there.
Great insight. That's a short nugget right there that'll have my editor turn into a word for sure. That's great.
Yeah, multi-threading. So making dials, putting in effort, being very coachable and teachable usually is like a good sign of success as well. Going the extra mile, and like doing extra work, not just like, oh, my metrics are 50 dials a day, I'm gonna hit 50 dials today. Like, all right, well, if you didn't have any conversations with anyone, you should probably keep going. So knowing like what your end goal is to find winnable business for your company. The more you do that, the more you're going to be a rock star and the more money you're going to make.
Wanted to talk a bit about the key metrics in the SDR role. Like, what are the basic KPIs you need to hit?
Yeah, there's a few different types of metrics. So there's the metrics that you're going to get paid on, and then usually like activity type metrics, the things and the effort that it shows, that like helps lead you to those things. And in a good company, like they've kind of engineered those things. So like the effort and work that you're putting in on the activity level, you're doing the right amounts, it should yield the results that you need on the things you get paid on. Yes. So making enough calls to talk to enough people, to have enough conversations, to book enough meetings. So booking meetings, making dials, sending emails, prospecting people, landing qualified meetings, having those meetings. Most common SDRs are getting paid off of getting sales accepted leads or some vernacular thereof, and qualified opportunities. So getting a lead that your AE like wants to work, they're like, ooh, there's something here. We've had a meeting, it's qualified, great. I'm going to take this lead, and then they develop that lead and it becomes an opportunity. There's a pain, need, fit with the product, and they think that they can actually put dollars attached to it. So usually those like sales accepted leads and opportunities are the things that most SDRs get paid on. Some companies are going to put it in accelerators for closed business or like multi-threaded deals with like get really big. And then like activity, if you are not hitting your quota, you need to be putting in more activity. You need to show the effort behind it. If your company has engineered metrics of like, okay, I'm gonna make this many calls and I'm gonna prospect this many people, and then that should get me this many meetings and convert, and like you're doing the front stuff and the other stuff not happening, then you really need to look at like the types of conversations you're having and like look at it almost like if you're brand new to sales, it's called a funnel. You talk to a lot of people and then you try to get more and more there, but eventually the funnel gets smaller. Yes. So if your funnel is like whoosh, like gets really small really fast, like you need to be looking at, okay, now I need to look at the details of what I'm doing. Clearly it takes me 3 times as many calls to like get as many meetings as my peers. Then like I need to like figure out what's up with my calls. Is it the beginning of the calls? are all my calls like a minute and a half long and then they end? Cool. Then that's clearly an opener issue. How are you starting your conversations?
Yeah.
If you have a lot of calls that go really long, but you're not booking meetings, then you're not hooking them in there. You're probably a really nice person to talk to, but you're not getting getting the meat out of it. If you're only having 2 to 3 minute conversations, then there is like something like you're not as enjoyable to talk to. You're good at opening it. You just don't know where to take it. So those are some things that like most SDRs should probably like look at beyond just like hitting the numbers, is like, how are your conversations going, and finding an analytical way to break it down. It's really easy to say like, oh, make calls and make a lot of money. The way to success, honestly, is like breaking down each step in the process and like optimizing like the parts that you can, and like finding the things in the process that you're already a rock star at. Like our buddy Zach Lawson, we were talking about, like he knew right away, oh, if I just dial more than anybody else, like I'm going to have like 3 times as many chances to make money as everyone else because I'm making 3 times the number of calls. I'm like, cool, do it. But then I've got other people that are like, well, if I make 60 powerful calls and like I milk every conversation, then like I could like make a ton of money by like getting everyone like, cool, do that. You got to be like a magician on the phone, like a psychology wizard navigating that conversation, but more power to you. Do it.
The first mistake to avoid when trying to break into tech sales, especially with no experience, is having no resume narrative. Can you please expand on that point?
Yeah, I mean, most resumes are just bullet point list of facts, right? I did this, then I did that. I went here to school, then I had this job. Instead of like, I'll use my resume as an example because I don't have another one in front of me.
Yeah.
But it could say something like aspirations to become a CEO one day. First, I spent a few years mastering the art of SaaS sales to get that skill under my belt. Then I went and started a company so that I could gain a more expansive skill set and view over the business. I quickly realized that I wasn't ready for that. So then I went to join Gong at an early stage and watch an amazing CEO build his company. And now I did. So just putting a story together between all of the moves you've made will put your resume in a different league, right? Instead of just like, here's what I did, then I did that, then I did that, right? Everybody's going to have a different version of what their narrative should be. And I also want to make sure I'm not overselling this point. If you have a great resume narrative, it's not automatically going to fix everything for you, because a resume can only go so far. But it is the first mistake people make, is just almost tritely listing off the things they've done instead of listing their accomplishments in a way that almost unfolds like a book from chapter to chapter in their life.
So what I'm hearing is that data and facts, just that raw info, doesn't really resonate, but it's telling a story arc, like you're the hero in a journey, where you highlighted stepping stones that all built on each other, and there was a purpose behind it. Like you learned something, you observed the leader, there was intentionality behind it and told through a lens of a story.
I think one of the biggest thing that candidates discount is like past experience that can relate to a sales role, and not having a cohesive story. Like candidly, I don't want to speak for everyone, but managers are pretty open-minded at the SDR level. Obviously, assuming you have some sort of track record, formal education maybe, or you went out on your own, you've worked retail sales, car sales, now you're trying to break into B2B sales. I think a lot of people discount the value of just having a very cohesive story. And like in my case, as an example, it's like even coming from the engineering world, like I mentioned, I had the athletic career as well. I had a lot of qualifications, and I had kind of the raw skills that work well for tech sales. And I'm sure people trying to break in have kind of that raw ambition, but I still had to craft a story as to like, I had an engineering job that I had done well for 3 years. I had been promoted, I had won awards, et cetera. I didn't want to do that. And why, I had to convince them almost like, why am I coming into this entry-level SDR position? And on the flip side, it's like, even if you don't feel qualified, I'm so much more intrigued if you show up, you've done research on the company, and you have a really compelling reason as to why you want to break into this role. I think people are so focused on having like a perfect answer, as opposed to just trying to maybe calm down just a bit, create that authentic narrative, and like be willing to accept the outcome. Maybe some companies are going to resonate with it, some companies won't. But I think people are really afraid to craft a great and compelling story, as opposed to like, how should I say this? How should I say this? And it's kind of like, in a way, you're almost asking the wrong question, right?
Amen, dude. Like, I mean, we're cut from the same cloth, and telling a story, by the way, is, according to statistics, 7 times or more powerful than data and facts. So I'm not saying you have to go into crazy storytelling mode, but being able to answer the question of, like, tell me about your resume, tell me about your background, and answer it through the lens of taking your special sauce, your unique experiences as a bartender. Yep. Or selling, one of the guys I was working with was selling season tickets to the Texan games. Well, there's relevant skills in there. Yep. Extracting the relevant qualities, like, say, maybe coachability, grittiness, proactiveness, ability to pick up the phone, things like that, and translating them from that unique experience to what they look for in the role, showing what you bring to the table. Of course, then answering the question, why tech sales? And then why specifically that exact company within tech sales.
A great exercise that I recommend people do is put 90 seconds on the clock and answer that question. And again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier. I don't want to say that there is one answer to that. I think it's, tell me some cool things about your background, which, again, even if, I worked with someone that worked in the restaurant industry and just broke into tech sales, and we worked together to highlight some of the things that they were able to do, from increasing number of orders. They had a huge impact on how many catering orders they did. And so all that to say, when you want to set the stage for someone to go into your experience further, but I think just a 90-second quick overview of highlighting some cool things you did, like, hey, I worked at a restaurant, but one of the things that even caught my attention of sales in the first place is that I spent 3 months and actually increased our catering orders by 30% over that time, and then as I got into it, maybe I went to school for computer science or whatever, right? While I'm working this restaurant job, as I got exposure to tech, I realized and really just learned about tech sales that I loved some of the technical things that I was doing, but I knew for a fact I didn't want to be at the desk 9 to 5, 8 hours a day, just writing and banging out code, right? And so for me, and why we're here today is, learning the experience through technology of a very complex B2B tech sales cycle is, I think, the next logical thing for me. And it's really going to push me further than anything I've done to date or something like that. Right. So I hope that helps. I'm using an example to kind of,
dude, it's so good. And that illuminates why it's great to invest in coaching with someone like yourself, or doing a program, because someone like you and myself would help someone go through the process of translating their story. And the other thing I'm going to throw in that you hit on is intentionality. Like, I am big on this, like, be intentional in everything you do. You have a reason. Like, why did you start here? Why did you then make this move? And then in the process to highlight outcomes, because sales is an outcomes business. Speak the language of business outcomes. Like, here's why I did this. And while I was there, these are some of the results I produced. Hopefully there's dollar quantities attached to what you've done. And if not, that's okay. But here's how I stack ranked against my peers. But ultimately, having intentionality is key. Even if, like, say you were unemployed in the pandemic, like, maybe you could show, like, I took this time to educate myself and invest in this, and this is why I did it, for a reason. And so I think that, they just want to see that there is intentionality to, what you're doing.
An interesting topic that we can shift to now is ATS systems. I think that's redundant. I think that's redundant because it's application tracking systems.
Applicant tracking system.
Shoot, I always do that.
I do it, and I've been working with it. It's the ATS.
What is that for those who don't know? And, tell us about why it's important to understand them, and we'll just expand from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So an ATS is an applicant tracking system. That is where recruiters and hiring teams, we live and breathe. That's basically our CRM. And that is where we use it to post jobs. We use it to vet candidates. We use it for our application collection. It's really has been in the past, our bread and butter in order to keep things organized. And there are hundreds of different types of ATS.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My understanding is an ATS, I'm not going to add system on
top.
top.
Okay.
It could rule someone out, and they could, like, as in the SDR role, you need certain qualities like coachability, grit, passion, ability to collaborate are what actually lead to success. And you might not have the resume on paper, but you could do a great job. But unfortunately, you get ruled out if you're not set up to get past the ATS system. And so like, what do ATS systems flag for? Like, how do they actually work? Why will it sometimes lead to someone being ruled out? And what can they do to get over that hurdle?
Yeah, great question. So the ATS systems have progressively gotten more and more advanced. Like as early as like 3 years ago, we can plug in the job description. We can add 3 or 4 different key, indicators that are going to be the top 3 areas as this person's going to be successful. And then we're good. And the recruiter goes through and starts vetting. Now with the incorporation of AI into the ATS, this is what's gotten so cumbersome for folks that are on the market right now. So with the AI, if you apply to multiple roles within a company, the ATS will flag you because we don't want somebody who is shotgunning approach into our company. We want somebody who is truly passionate about the role they're applying for, rather than, I like your company, I'm going to apply to these 15 and let's see what sticks. So ATS will now, they are getting smarter and smarter. If you have photos on your on your job description, on your resume, as lovely as it is to see you, that will get you filtered out.
Oh my gosh, you're dropping gold, by the way. This is like, these are the answers to the test. Like,
well,
guys.
Like we've all been trained that,
Wow.
throughout the history, resumes need to be 1 page. They need to stand out. You need your soft skills. You need to have color. You need to have different fonts. You need to have pictures. All of that advice will get you booted out of the
Oh my
ATS
gosh,
now.
you're coming from a well-intentioned place. I want to bring a personal touch with a nice professional
Yes,
photo.
and that's the
it's
hard
actually
part.
screwing you.
Yes,
Like,
it is screwing you over.
What else?
Have the proficiencies on there, because if you have your proficiencies and listed in with your actual job responsibilities, a lot of the times you'll be flagged as not being a fit because the ATS identifies things in certain blocks, like summary, objective, proficiencies, skills, experience, education, leadership. Those are the sections that ATS understand. Those are the primary ones that we populate in recruiting, to where if you don't have it easily broken down on your resume for the ATS to understand, you will get booted out. And it's not really like booted out, is auto rejected.
How can people think about structuring their resume in a way that the ATS understands? I'll just open that up to you, and it's a broad question, but I love some.
Keep it boring. So
That's hard for me.
it's
Shoot.
right.
For people like us, like,
My resume is 6.5 pages long with a lot of different fonts and colors, but I don't send it anywhere. I don't
that's funny.
ever.
It's
put
just
it
for
into
you.
ATS.
You have like this beautiful,
It's for me to sit there and go
multicolored.
like, I'm kind of important. No, it's what I send to people. Like if somebody asks for a resume, that's what they get.
Okay. When you know they're going to review
When I know they're going to review it, they get my pretty
it.
resume.
You're in the actual interviews.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That is what I will bring. So if you're like meeting with executives and you're going on site, that's the resume that you have copies of that you make sure everyone's talking to. That's when you bring the pretty resumes. When you're applying, keep it on a Word doc or a PowerPoint. Don't get creative with it, because if it's not Word or if it's not PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint,
Like a Google
PDF or a doc, ATS won't accept it either. So if it's in a weird format, it won't be accepted. Text formats, it shows up at a blank page. But for your resume, again, keep it simple. You want all your contact information on there. We don't need your address. We need your name, city, state, so we know that if we're hiring in a specific area, you qualify. If we're hiring remote, or we're authorized to hire remote in your state.
Yeah.
So that helps us. Phone number so that we can call you. Email, you'd be amazed. People forget this. Email so we can reach out to you. And then your LinkedIn profile.
Okay.
Those are the main things. Your LinkedIn profile is actually your number one, more important than your resume.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Okay, then we're going to go there next.
Okay.
Just anything to wrap up then on the content
Take
of
your
the
soft
resume.
skills out. We don't want soft skills are a waste of space and a waste of time.
What are examples of like some fluffy soft skills that I'm probably guilty of?
I played football in the NFL. I love my dogs, and on, days off, I walk on the beach and have a glass of wine. Stuff like that people actually put on their resumes. Soft skills.
Okay.
Here's a little bit about me. Good communication. We know this.
I mean, that's assumed.
That's assumed.
And
yeah.
you have to show that in your interviews too.
Yes,
that's
do.
what matters.
Yes, you do. And you have to do it on your resume, because if you
Okay.
can't communicate on your resume, you can't communicate, period.
In terms of like your actual outcomes and experience, like is it best to just be data driven? Like I drove like X 100,000 in revenue, or like is that important on the resume?
It depends on your role. For SDRs, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need, what was your quota? How many dials did you make? How many leads? What percentage were you at? We need all the metrics, because that's going to determine if you can keep up with the bandwidth and the pipeline that we have within our organizations. Put if you have sold into particular companies, name drop those businesses. Those would be the keys for sales. CS as well. And don't worry about
don't worry
it,
about
your
it being
resume
pretty.
being one page, for the love of God.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never had a job, like my 19-year-old son, he has got a one-page resume. He's literally had 2 jobs before.
Wow.
That's okay. If you are a junior starting your career, 1 page, absolutely fine. But if you've been in your role or in your career for at least 3 years, it's okay to break that 1 page.
Interesting, because I still think like less is more, stick to the 1 page, but that's kind of liberating. Now I'm 9 years in sales that I can actually expand
I
to more.
I can't put my experience into 1 page, and I write resumes for
Yeah.
people. I'm not able to squeeze it into 1 page at all. So I'm just like, you know what? Good thing we don't do resumes anymore. Here's my LinkedIn.
Yep, exactly.
You can't tell how many pages LinkedIn is.
I've got two baseline versions of my resume as a tip for folks out there. Obviously, like people say to tailor it for whatever jobs, do that or not do that. But for me, I've got like a designed pretty version for like if I actually get into an interview, and one is like a very stripped down. They're all 1 page. They don't have a resume more than 1 page, but like a 1 page, just a Word doc, very basic outline form, because like ATS systems, application tracking systems, if they can't read the experience, they will oftentimes like auto reject you, because they can't like read your experience, or it's like not getting the right information. This is for like cold applications. If you can get referrals, use your network. If you know anyone that works with a company, get your resume submitted by your referral. Don't go through the application process. Get it sent in by your friend. But if you're doing a cold application, like have a very basic generic version of your resume in the application. Give a prettier one in once you get like the next step. Because the systems will, like, if they can't read it or the formatting's funny, like they'll populate in the wrong places, the information, and then like they'll use some systems like, okay, we were looking at everyone at this level, and if your resume didn't populate the stuff in their system in the right places, then it's not getting the right information to filter you. I've heard hit and miss things from people like, oh, I know I'm not ready to interview if I'm not writing a cover letter for the job. And in my mind, I'm like, I've literally never read a cover letter that anyone ever sent in, but I don't know. So I'm like, I have a template that like a career coach gave me for a cover letter. And so with ChatGPT, I'm like, hey, can you help me write a cover letter using this template, this job description, and my resume? And I like literally just like paste all 3 of those things in mass into ChatGPT, and it pumps out like a brilliant cover letter. And it like literally like tailors it to like what the job is and my experiences that are in my resume. Like it's in like seconds.
How do you beautify the LinkedIn and make it look good? If you have a couple pro tips.
Yeah, for sure. So the headshot is really important. And I don't mean to say that you need to go and spend a few $1,000s on a professional headshot. That's not what I mean. I think pretty much everybody probably has one of these. It's got portrait mode. So take a good photo of yourself. And I know that sounds silly, but it really makes a difference. Just look like a professional. LinkedIn is a professional networking community. It is not Twitter. It is not Facebook. Yes, it is still a social media company, but it's a professional networking site. So show up like a professional. And then in every section of LinkedIn is there for a reason. Your About Me section should be the things that motivate you. It should be about who you are as a person. Your job history should have some sort of explanation of what you did and what you accomplished. Just like build out every section. It takes time. It takes energy to do this. I did mine. It took probably a whole weekend of sporadic few hours of work here and there until it got to a place that I was pretty happy with it. And you talk mostly about your work oriented accomplishments, but fold in your personality. Like I have how my track record was up through SDR and into sales and marketing, but I own 2 corgis and I love corgis. And you might have seen my mug earlier, the corgis on it. Like that's part of my personality. And I'm totally cool with 90% of my profile being work professional oriented and 10% of it being about me, because that's a good balance, I think, for LinkedIn.
Right now, because the market is so saturated with people looking for work, we have more people on the market than we do jobs. So when we do post a role, we get inundated. Within 30 minutes, I can have over 200 applicants. And out of those 200 applicants, maybe a dozen actually hit the mark. So that is a huge time suck for us to go through and weed out and read all those different resumes. So we've kind of stopped doing that. Now, in order to get hired, you need to be a referral or a sourced candidate. And in order to get sourced, you need to have a LinkedIn, especially if you're in sales. LinkedIn, Indeed, GitHub, depending on what your background is. GitHub, definitely for engineers. LinkedIn, predominantly for pretty much everybody else. And LinkedIn is a very, very important now because the AI crawlers are now recruiters' best friends and hiring managers' best friends, because there's not a lot of recruiters left on the market.
So these AI crawlers, how do they work? Is it is a recruiter like, I need to hire for this SDR candidates with these parameters, like this experience, and get the creepy crawly running on LinkedIn?
Pretty much. We get AI creepy crawler, like professional stalker kind of skills.
How does it work? It's kind of fun to...
Basically, the way it works, depending on which AI plugin you're using, and all of these are free, which, again, has kind of done away with people like me.
Interesting.
To where we can literally just upload the job description into these tools. If you have an intake or a Q&A session, or, the top 5 skill sets that you're looking for, and then you tell it, I want you to source on LinkedIn or GitHub, depending on what I'm hiring. It always goes to LinkedIn for me, pulls in 20 candidates, and I usually end up hiring out of those 20.
Okay.
Whereas, ATS, I have hundreds of people, and there might not even be 20 people qualified within there. So the crawlers are literally doing all the sourcing that we used to have talent acquisition sourcers and recruiters doing for us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you help the crawlers find you? Do you give it try and look at the job description and match to keywords? And I'm thinking from the perspective of this aspiring SDR that knows they want to work at, for a company in your portfolio, for example, or like an exciting AI SaaS company.
If it's blank in LinkedIn, fill it out. That objective or the About You section in LinkedIn needs to be a combination of an objective and a career summary.
Okay.
This is everything that I've done. This is why I'm a rock star, and this is what I'm looking for next. And then basically LinkedIn is your new resume. So whatever you have on your resume, copy and paste and put in LinkedIn. Because for the last 9 months, I think, I've not once been asked for a resume. And I've hired just under 70 people.
Wow.
Everything's LinkedIn.
70 people hired. None of them were coming from resumes.
None of them are coming from resumes.
So
all of them coming from just referrals and sourced candidates, thanks to wonderfully populated LinkedIn profiles.
Okay. So we have to have a wonderfully populated LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
And it seems like the content itself, like the words, are very important. I've talked to people in the past about, have a nice picture with an open teeth smile that shows some credibility and instills confidence and makes you trustworthy. But I'm almost thinking that's not as important. It's not important to the crawlies, right?
No, it's not important to the crawlies or the hiring manager.
What? Mind blown.
We've never looked at them.
Really?
Usually we get honestly, even 10 years ago.
I'm a sales guy. I'm about visuals.
I know you are. And it's such a pretty smile. But
thank you.
Like even 10 years ago, I would get pictures on resumes and I'm like, yes, you're pretty. Okay, moving on. It's just one of those where it's always just, and I've been a resume coach and I've gotten the requirements from the state going, this is everything that you need. And I've literally wadded it up and thrown away because I'm the hiring manager. I know what I want to see. I'm the recruiter. I know what I'm looking for.
I wanted to get your thoughts on picking the right company. Instead of just chasing any 60K job and, I got a job and I got into tech sales, how do you make an intentional move that sets you up to maximize the career path?
Man, such a good question. I think there are so many different vectors to explore here, Chris, but probably the most important one is, do you want to work for a large established company, or do you want to work for a startup, scrappier kind of company? And the divergence there is, a large company, the benefits, the virtues are, they probably have it pretty well ironed out. You will go in, you'll have a pretty structured onboarding. You'll have pretty much every tool under the sun that you need to make use of, and you'll get a high degree of high caliber training. The downside is that your aperture will be probably more narrow than at a startup, because they have it all figured out and they have a lot more specialization than a startup has. A startup will probably have far looser onboarding, far less training. You'll need to be much more self-starting, but because of that, you'll get exposure to things that you probably wouldn't get exposure to at a larger company. You'll understand a bit more about cross-functional partners. You'll work more closely with the marketing team, with the sales team, et cetera, et cetera. So you just have to decide, what do you need? Do you need more structure, or do you want more autonomy? And some people thrive in different environments, and you have to be honest with yourself about what's going to be best for you. So that's number one. Number two is the industry that you're in. Well, what kind of technology do you actually want to sell? And this is not the easiest thing to answer. But you can develop a perspective here. I spent the first 6 years of my tech career selling to technical audiences, IT type audiences, and data analysts, data engineers. And now I'm selling to sales and marketing people. And I much prefer selling to sales and marketing people. I find it more engaging. I find it more fun. I find I get to use a bit more of my personality. And that's cool. Like, some people like that. Other people really like the data sheets, getting lost in the technical recs, like being a student of technology a bit more than in personalities or personas. So you have to understand what is the right fit for you, and what do you have a particular passion around? What do you actually enjoy learning about? And then you can apply both of those different vectors. And there's a lot more that goes into it, but those are two, I think, really important things that a lot of people don't really think too much about. Big company, small company, what industry do you want to be in? Matrix that out and pursue the thing that fits the checks the most boxes.
If I knew what I know now, what I would have done earlier on is I would go for all the big dogs. I would apply to Salesforce. I would apply to HubSpot. I would apply to the top 50 software companies
Snowflake,
to start. Snowflake.
I'd
I'd apply to all the best companies. Yeah, that's what I would do. But I didn't know that I could do that.
If you are fresh out of school, you are rather young, early 20s, maybe even late teens now. I know, some people are breaking in. I think the best thing you can do, even if you end up not liking it, is to go to a big brand. If you're able to get, like in your case, you get an offer at an Oracle of the world fresh out of college, that is a great move, because one, to your point, you get the Sandler training, you get the brand recognition. There's a lot of people who have been successful at Oracle, started other companies or become top reps there or elsewhere. And then from there, if you don't like that super large corporate setting, a lot of startups that are growing fast, in maybe a database startup as an example, would love to have you join their company. The flip side, I think in my case, I joined a startup because I had actually in the engineering world worked at a super large corporation. And later in your career, I would argue it gets harder and harder to go to a startup, because it usually demands more of you from a day-to-day. So for me, not that I saw it as like the last chance ever, but like I mentioned, I broke in as an SDR when I was like in my late 20s. And for me, it was kind of like, well, at this point, I've worked at a huge company. Let me go to a startup, see what it's about. And if I need to, I can work my way up to a bigger and bigger brand. And that's kind of how my path has gone since then. So I hope that helps. There's no perfect answer, but just reiterating, if you're young, if you get an offer from a brand name, just do it. You may not like it, but you have more options out of the gate because of that badge on the resume.
I started at Oracle. It was a good launch pad, right? It gave me marketability and the brand. It gave me some good training, right? They have good training. I did get a network, kind of like an MBA. There's a lot of Oracle people. They've gone on to other high tech places. And so that's cool. But the startup journey, and the startup now, has been the most rewarding yet. And clearly, the things you did at Gong are incredible. But so there's different paths, right? The big enterprise, the startup. How should these folks think about what's the right fit for them to start out? Enterprise versus startup?
I think it depends on what you want over the long term.
Okay.
If you wanted, I'll just use this easy example. If you wanted to be a startup CEO one day, like that's your 10-year goal, it makes approximately 0 cents to go work at a very big company.
Got it.
But if you wanted to be a VP at a very big company, then you should go work at a big company because you get to see how they operate, right? Or if you want to be like a sales leader who scales a startup to become a very big company, now it might make sense to get experience at both a big company and a small company because you need phased experiences. And so there's no like one size fits all answer. It just depends on what you want over the long term for yourself, and that'll start to dictate some of the answer there about what kind of companies you should work at.
And this is for tech startups. This advice is for tech startups.
Okay.
It's vastly different than getting into a big and established public company. Startups, we work a little bit differently. Do your research on the company. If they have a runway of at least 2 years, you're going to be good for a while. Talk to other people that are currently employed there. Find people that have just recently started, have only been there for a couple of months. Find out what their onboarding process was like. Through that research, you can definitely find out whether or not that's going to be a company that has your vibe, your culture, your type of people. And also make sure that you're in the right industry. Like there are certain industries in tech that you might have a passion for and you might not. If you're not passionate, you're not going to be successful.
What are some of the industries within tech that you think are exciting? Like for people who are, they don't know what they're really interested in yet, but they might want to look at like an industry that is solid where they, like if they happen to have a passion, it's a good wave to ride. So like maybe one or two, I'm putting you on the spot, but.
No, that's good. Honestly, right now, AI, obviously, is really,
exciting.
really hot. And it's really exciting because there's so many nuances to it. There's a lot that we haven't tapped into, and there's a lot that we're figuring out on the fly. AI right now is hiring like crazy. At S3, we're a B2B, fintech, medtech, SaaS tech.
Oh.
And so, but my background is B2B2C, e-commerce, and social collaboration platforms. So you can cross, you don't have to be industry, you can be industry agnostic, but AI right now is the industry that's thriving the most in 2024. That's where we see a lot of us putting our money just so we can get ahead of the curve.
What an insight coming from the person who's working at the VC that is
I know,
investing.
that is really investing.
You know, it's a good signal to look at where the VC's investing.
Yes.
If you're saying it's AI, then that's great. And the cool thing about AI is it can impact all types of industries like healthcare to improve patient
covers
outcomes,
the gambit.
improve
Yep.
learning outcomes and education. So someone could figure out like, do I care about healthcare or education, or am I interested in like finance, and then see like the leading AI companies in those verticals.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is pretty hot right now too.
that's a
To
good one.
counteract the AI.
Yeah, no, you're right though, and that is
Yep.
one of those that's never going to go away.
It is
companies,
never.
and it's particularly enterprise companies,
Yes.
will always need to invest in security. So there's always
Absolutely.
going to, even in a downturn.
Yep.
So great call out. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Especially in startups where there's a lot that needs to be figured out. There are two types of people you can hire. There's a barrel, like the barrel of a gun. Barrels point themselves in the right direction. They're very self-governing people. They get stuff done. They don't need an incredible amount of direction. They just figure it out. I have many barrels on my team at P Club. Everybody at P Club is a barrel because I can't afford to hire ammunition right now. Ammunition, there's nothing wrong with being an ammunition hire, but it means you do need to be pointed in the right direction. You're good when there's like a well-defined process or system that you can plug into. And that's what I mean by barrel versus ammunition. And there's nothing right or wrong with either one of those.
Okay.
I would argue, though, that most startups should be hiring barrels, like people who can figure shit out without being given a step-by-step roadmap. I'll give you an example. Maybe I'll shout her out. Actually, I will. There's a woman I've hired on my team named Haven Helm, and she runs professional services for P Club. Her ramp period lasted about half of a day, because at the end of the first half of her first day at P Club, it was clear that she was going to be just so good at this job that it doesn't even make sense for me to give her that much guidance. She just went, and she's crushing it, and she's doing amazing things. She's building all these processes, versus like I could have hired somebody to do professional services for our clients, but if they didn't have that, I'm going to figure this out, it only makes sense to hire them after we have all the well-defined processes. Now, I'll say one more thing. And I'm sure I'll get like a bunch of hate from somebody coming from this, because there's always something like that.
I love your honesty. That's important.
You will make much more impact, money, etc. over the long term if you can figure out how to be a barrel. Because what barrels do is they create roadmaps for other people. If you are the type of person who takes an ambiguous, uncertain situation and brings certainty to it, and clarity, and a roadmap, and a process, it is a very hard job to do. But now we're starting to get back to what we first talked about, which is freedom versus security. Are you the creator of a circumstance, or do you just operate within the confines that somebody else made for you?
It's a helpful metaphor, because I know at Google, even though it's a big company, they do look for barrels, people that can go in, especially Google Cloud, third in the market, kind of like a startup that's growing within Google. They're looking for the people that can define processes, thrive in ambiguity. And I've definitely seen it at a startup. There was someone I was working with that I referred to a VP of sales at this unicorn data analytics company, maybe Series B or C, and they're just looking for the first SDR hire. And the reality is he wasn't a fit at the time because they were looking for a barrel employee. So that's just something to be aware of, that these early startups are looking for a true barrel. Again, continuing on with the metaphor. And at a large enterprise, you can afford to be more of an ammunition. And I actually think that, I wonder, Chris, you can evolve from ammunition into a barrel. I think that's what happened with me. So I coming out of college, I went to a good university, I was a smart guy, but honestly was kind of ammunition, but Oracle was a good place for that. And then I learned at Oracle and Google to evolve into a barrel. And so that's kind of hopeful and cool, because I saw someone in the comments, I'm not sure your name, but they were like, oh, kind of wondering about this barrel versus ammunition. I think you can, with a growth mindset, you could evolve into a barrel.
It's, we already talked about one of my most fundamental beliefs, which is converting dreams into reality. The other belief I have is you can mold and sculpt yourself. Like being a barrel versus ammunition, it's just a skill, right? Like all of these things are skills that can be learned.
Could you talk through the differences between like a very technical sales role versus not?
Yeah, I think there's so many ways you can break it down. A lot of what comes to mind is certainly the types of personas you're speaking with. Highly technical engineers, really, I mean, social skills aside, right? The stereotypes of engineers, they're very, very busy, and they're putting out fires at any given time. And they really don't have time to speak with someone who's not very knowledgeable and equipped. And so on one level, I think there's an element, again, a technical rep does not have to write code, but there is just a line, like if you are not willing to go and learn all about the technology, there's really not a way that you can foster a great conversation with an engineer. To your point on like the less technical solutions, it's not a better or worse thing, but in many times, if you're selling to an HR department, or even if you're selling to like a sales leader, those types of conversations and the skill sets required are just different than having to find and create technical value with someone who's been coding for 10 plus years, right? So there's so many more challenges I could get into, but that's what comes to mind. So
yeah, that's so insightful. And I interviewed another guy who was selling an HR software, and he was a founding SDR, and he said, "Hey, I just want to think about the path of least resistance. It's easy to talk to HR people; they love people or salespeople. So, but clearly, you chose a more challenging and engaging path, and I did too. With like Oracle database. It's funny, we were cut from a similar cloth, and then getting into Google Cloud." But yeah, like with engineers as well, I think like they're analytically minded. And so if you're a very, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but like I'm very passionate and emotional, and I have to like kind of manage myself and adapt like a chameleon to like mirror and match their style. So you have to keep that into account, right? Like you have to be able to speak their language.
Your most valuable thing, which is your time, your talent, your energy, you're going to dedicate 40, 50 hours to this company for the next 1 to 3 years, maybe the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So why not really go deep to make sure you feel good about the company? You could show up to the interview, they're interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. It's a two-way street. You could decide, guys, actually, I was really excited to meet with you, but based on what I've heard, it doesn't seem like this is actually the right opportunity for me. Walk away.
Why wouldn't it be the right opportunity for
Maybe
someone?
It doesn't meet your criteria. Maybe you're under the belief that you'll be getting paid this. Maybe you believe you will start as an SDR and your track to promote to an account executive is 6 months, but all of a sudden they say, actually, it's 2 years. Maybe you ask them what percentage of reps are hitting today.
Yes.
Hey, 10%. Hey, can I speak with someone who's doing it today? No, you don't do that. So you got to make sure it's the right thing for you, because the last thing you want to do is get into a company that you are not all in on, and then you're gonna be deer in headlights in the first month and already be thinking about backup plans.
Yeah.
And there's no way for you to be all in, committed, and perform at your highest level if you don't want to be there. In my previous company, I wanted to be there. I wanted to grow there, and there was never the moment of, let me just go find a greener grass. Let me just go job hop. It was, I'm going to make it happen here. The most important work is the work right in front of me. Let me do that.
I think the three big characteristics, and I was an SDR manager for 2 years. The three big ones I look for, if you can communicate these, are work ethic, coachability, and that you're a team player. I think if you can communicate those three things, what manager doesn't want someone who works hard, has the right work ethic, is coachable? Like, if you put time and effort into developing them, they're going to take that and run with it. And then not only that, like when they do take your coaching and start succeeding, they're going to help the rest of your team. Because from a selfish standpoint, you got to put yourself in the manager's shoes too. They're not just managing you. Like, they're graded on their performance of the whole team, which could be 10 to 15 people. I at one point had over 20 people on my team at one point. So any people who can convey that they work hard, they're coachable, and then when they start succeeding, they're going to help make your life easier, I think is pretty much a slam dunk SDR candidate for any manager.
You are competitive.
Okay.
You are money driven, and you like the chase.
Competitive, money driven, and like the chase. I love that.
Yep.
Okay.
That profile of that you just told me about, of somebody who's successful in sales, it's not about like lines on a resume. It's way more about how they think and how they operate. It's the capabilities, it's the mindset that we're trying to multiply here, that we're trying to find fits for and hire for. What are those mindset traits? What are those things that make a successful salesperson? Number one on the list is curiosity. Somebody who is always self-starting and eager to learn something new. Passion in life. They need to have some sort of spark. Show me that you can get excited about something, talk excitedly about something, convince somebody that thing that's important to you should be important to them. That's what passion is for me. And then we get into organization and creativity and communication skills and a handful of other things. But really for me, it's curiosity and passion. And if I'm able to build a profile of folks that have that shared way of thinking, I don't necessarily care about what you studied in school or where you went to school or if you went to school. I don't care. What I care about is that you think and operate in a way that is productive, that you're going to bring something to the table that the rest of the team maybe doesn't have, so that this team is actually a team in a sense that somebody's weaknesses are made up for by somebody else's strengths. And we operate that same way. Like if you're fielding or putting on a court a basketball team, you don't want 5 centers running around. You need a point guard, you need a shooting guard, you need the center, you need that diversity of role to round out a highly functioning team. And that's what I was able to, after a handful of bumps and bruises along the way of trying and failing to fit the traditional profile, ultimately created my own profile, and it worked very well. And it became my hiring ethos to this very day, when my talent pool is more or less unlimited now in the remote world. I can hire anybody anywhere. But even still, I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what you studied. I care about how you think, how you operate, how you work, how good of a teammate you are. And that's the profile that I built. And that's the sort of hiring process that I built for Looker. And now same sort of thing for the folks that we hire at Clary.
So what qualities do you look for in SDR candidates? Like, what are some of the most important qualities?
Yeah. Folks that have if anyone that I've worked with is on the streaming or watches this later, they'll know exactly what my answer is going to be. My number one favorite answer to this question is self-awareness. I'm a big fan of Dan Pink. He's written a few like business books, sales books. His book, To Sell is Human, would be a really great book for anyone wanting to be an SDR. This is not a sponsored stream by Dan Pink.
I need to read that, by the way. I've been taking some notes myself. I read it. 9 years in the industry, so it's time to read it.
Basically, it talks about how no matter what role or job you have, you are selling yourself. You're selling something in any job that you have. And the people, statistically, the people who are the best at sales are not people who are super introverted or super extroverted. Usually people think that extroverted people make really great salespeople, but it's actually people that are right in the middle on the pendulum of introverted to extroverted that are statistically, scientifically the best salespeople. And it's because they're not afraid to talk, but they are also like good at listening. And I've spent a lot of time like trying to unpack this in my sales career to try to find like the best talent. And it's the people that are self-aware tend to be the people that I can find are like in that middle slot. People that can know how to read a room. If you can read a room on a sales call and like read like, oop, I'm about to lose this person, like they're getting antsy, you know how to change your pitch to meet them. If you're good at reading a room and like reading yourself, you don't need your manager to hold your hand all day. You're like, man, I've been really slacking on my dials. Like, I bet people can see that. I need to like amp it up tomorrow and like catch up. You can like coach yourself to like where you need to be. And so like that's probably like the number one quality. Work ethic, natural curiosity, great sense of humor are really wonderful things. I recommend all of them. But like self-awareness is like trying to find things out. So when like in our interviews, we'll often ask like, tell us about your previous steps. It's not because I don't have the notes on them. I do have the notes on how your previous calls with other people have been. What I'm looking for is how well you can repeat it back to me. And your version of how your interviews with the hiring manager before this panel and the recruiter went, to see if it aligns with these notes, to see how well you recollect those things, so I can test your self-awareness and your memory. And I'm like, oh, it was great. I loved it. And the manager's like, it was kind of rough, but they got a good background. And I'm like, whoa, okay, either this person is trying to really impress and like failing, or they totally just don't even see reality. So be thinking of those things.
I think it's really cool in tech sales where you have a super unique ability to demonstrate the way you sell as you're trying to land a job.
Yes.
If I'm like a surgeon, I can't like apply for a role by like giving surgery to the hiring manager.
Yeah. Dude, this is an amazing metaphor. Keep going. This is so good.
But if you're applying for an SDR role, cold call the person that's hiring. Send a really cool personalized cold email to them, multi-channel approach them, hit them up on LinkedIn, show that you're disciplined, show that you're persistent. Replicate the way you would be an SDR in the way you're applying for the role. It is their first exposure to the way you're actually going to act if you do get the job. So that's step one, is like ignore LinkedIn Easy Apply. That is a waste of your time. Find the right people. The way I'd approach it, like if we want to get super tactical.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting there and maybe I'm in college right now, or maybe I'm in a different career and I want to break into tech, I'm going to go find the 5 companies that I really want to work for. The product seems cool. People have good things to say. I look at RepView. They're doing well. Yep. I look at Glassdoor, all the things. I'm going to make a spreadsheet of the 5 companies I want to break into. And then I'm going to pick 5, depends on your role, but if you want to be an AE, 5 AE managers. If you want to be an SDR, 5 SDR managers at that company. And I am going to strategically reach out to all of them and just go down the list. And if I don't hear back, then I'm going to go back to their LinkedIn profile and pick 5 more people at that company. But like, I'm going to be multi-threading. I want different conversations with different people at different companies. And I want to literally show them the way I'm going to operate in the role, in the way that I'm applying for the role. So that's like the first thing.
Earning the interview is critical. And the things that you can do, and I think you said the questioner's name was Aaron. Is that right, Aaron?
It is Aaron, yes.
Aaron. So Aaron, what I would recommend to you is, I actually published a little checklist on this, and Chris, you were kind enough to promote that as well. But I have a pre-interview checklist. And one of the things I'll recommend to you, Aaron, and any job seeker out there, is put yourself in the role. Like if you were a sales development rep, if you were a salesperson, one of the main things that you're going to need to do is do a lot of outreach inside of a company to get multi-threaded, to communicate to the entire buying group, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can show the interview panel or the hiring manager that you have this aptitude by doing this ahead of the interview. If you're applying for an SDR role, reach out to other SDRs on the team and ask for 5 minutes. Hey, I'm interviewing for the role. Was hoping to learn a little bit more about the day-to-day. I've got a few other questions for you. Can you give me 5 minutes tomorrow? Reach out to a handful of SDRs, SDR managers, salespeople at the company, and build what we call a POV, build your perspective on that account. So that way, when you finally reach out to the hiring manager, which is the next thing I'll recommend, reach out directly to the hiring manager and tell him or her, hey, I just applied for your role. And here's why I'm excited about it. I talked to Alex, I talked to Vivi, and I talked to Karen, and here's what I learned. And I'm going to be a really good fit for your role because I hit the X, Y, and Z. Looking forward to the conversation. And that's how you can kind of collect more information, do the things that 99% of people are unwilling or unable to do, and set yourself above the crowd, aside from like formatting your resume and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at a resume in years. I look at LinkedIn profiles and I looked at the communications that come across my desk, like directly to me or directly to our hiring managers. And those are the people that float to the top of the pile, frankly. So yes, have a polished resume. Yes, write good cover letters. But for the most part, just be proactive into the people that you're going to be working with. And it's a huge, it takes a lot of effort. You can't do this for every company that you apply to. I know that. But for the ones that are, in your top 5 list, treat it like it's an account that you're trying to penetrate. Treat it like it's a deal you're trying to close. Go and cast a wide net for the cast of characters out there and learn what it's actually like to work at the company. The best resume you have for yourself is your behaviors. You can have the line on your resume that says that you are 140% to quota, or that you did XYZ thing, or you won some award in your honor society, or whatever. But putting that into action and showing somebody how you achieve those results, actions speak so much more loudly than words. And so that's what I encourage people to do. And again, it's a muscle that you build. It's hard to do this. It is hard to do this. I want to be very clear about that. The thing that, actually, I have this book right here. Do Hard Things.
I love that.
Do Hard Things. This is a really good book, by the way. These are the things that other people are not willing to do. And by definition, because other people, again, 99 out of 100 people do not do this, you stand out. You will get an answer. You'll get a yes or you'll get a no, which is way better than getting a no answer. So that's what sales is all about. That's what the mindset is all about. You have to be willing to do the things other people won't, and you have to be willing to take rejection in stride, pick yourself up, and get back at it, an hour later, or, and you got to earn the interview. That's the key difference. It's not just spray and pray a resume out there and cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's be proactive, control what you can control, and earn the interview. You can show them in the pre-interview forum, whether it's LinkedIn or email or whatever it is, when you're reaching out to them, you can show them that you have this capacity, that you've done the research, that you've spoken with people there, and then you can ask them thoughtful questions in that outreach that you're doing to them. Not necessarily expecting them to answer you via email, but hey, when we speak live, and you can be a little assumptive here. The salespeople love the assumptive close. Hey, when we speak live in the interview, here are a handful of questions that I'm very interested in getting your perspective on. So that's a way that you can try and accelerate things and show people that you're operating this way, that you have this capability of asking deep and thoughtful and meaningful questions prior to the interview setting.
For someone that has none of the degrees or connections, doesn't have access to a college career fair, which a lot of people don't, how do you break into tech sales if that is your objective? So if that's the objective, you got to start writing that down every day. I have a sales job, and be very clear on what you want. Do you want to work fully remote? Do you want to move to a new city? Do you want to be hybrid? Do you want to work for a big company, small company? You got to be very clear on the intention, opposed to just blanket applying to hundreds of companies, auto apply. That never really pans out well for most people.
100% agree.
So what you do, and what I'd recommend, is you are deploying the same set of sales skills to get a sales job as you are in the sales job. Think about that. So you will be selling yourself. You are the product. You are the outcome. What problem are you solving? You're solving the company's need to generate more revenue and to hire for that specific role. So you need to understand what you would be doing. And when they ask, hey, so Chris, why should I hire you? Why are you different from the 100 other qualified people with a bachelor degree that want this role? You got to be able to answer that question. So to put yourself in that position, it's the same thing as a sales process. Treat it like a sales process. Who are the top 10 companies you want to work for? Write them down. What job in those companies do you want? Link that in your Google Doc, whatever you're doing to track this. Apply to that job. You're just going to submit a resume. Once you apply, here's what you do to differentiate yourself. And this worked for me. Identify who within the company could be responsible for hiring that position. So you want to look for talent acquisition, recruiters, hiring managers, and then additionally, the actual sales leaders, the team you may be on. So the director of sales development, SDR manager, sales manager, VP of sales. Get all of these people in a spreadsheet and start reaching out to them. And what I'd recommend doing, and this is what I did this summer because I was considering getting back into tech. I wanted it. I did an extensive research process. I said, I want to work for a venture capital funded tech unicorn in Silicon Valley. I'll have an exit one day. I identified the top company on my list. They're selling HR software, which I have experience in. I applied to the role. I connected with 5 different people on LinkedIn. I didn't send them some spammy, hey, let's meet. I just sent them a blank connection request. And then I cold emailed them the next day. I said, are you still hiring for the enterprise account executive position? ? I recently applied. I'm interested. I bring 5 years of software sales experience. I've closed $1.54 million in ARR. Although I don't meet your 10 years of experience, I was way underqualified. Here's a video of me explaining why I think I'd be a good fit. I made an 8-minute video of me selling their product to them. Anyways, thanks for considering me. Hope to hear from you soon. Within 2 hours, I get 2 responses from the VP of sales and the sales manager. They both respond to me and CC on the recruiter. And they say, hey, impressive application. You can meet with Susie, whoever. And then she sends me her calendar link. I get an interview on Monday. I don't end up getting the job. But the point of that story is, if you're willing to do what other people are not willing to do, you can stand out. Because in this market, it's very hard to stand out. Anyone can apply, but not everyone can stand out. You must get their attention and get them to give you an interview. At that point, you're on your own and you've got to crush the interviews, and we can talk about that. Yeah. But the whole point of this is you got to be excited about the company you want to work for, and you got to be willing to put in 2 to 3 hours of research so that you can then do something like that, because what I just described will work every time. It will work if you do that.
You know what? You're exactly right. I know someone who got a job at Snowflake, again, a top data analytics company, and they sent a video pitch. Yep. Right. That is a differentiator right there. I'm curious, what went into that 8-minute pitch? Was it, just give us a little look under the hood.
Let me give you the specific line you can say in any interview, and this plays into the video. Put yourself in their shoes. What do they want in the new hire they're bringing on? Why would they pay you? Why are they paying you? You are going to generate them, if you're in a sales role, more pipeline, which will result in more revenue. They want to hire 50 sales reps because they know that for each sales rep, they'll make 2x return. So if I'm closing $300,000, they're going to make $600,000 on me. Think about it from the business standpoint. You need to be very clear on why they are bringing you on, so that when they say, so Chris, why Snowflake? You say, look, I am an elite sales professional, and I am fully committed to coming in and generating as much meetings and pipeline for you as possible, leading to revenue. I want to learn. I have a lot of development left to do, so I want to learn from everyone. I want to come in and produce immediately, and hopefully eventually have the chance to be a leader. So what you want to do is you want to display to them, you're very clear on what you are going to do. I'm going to come in and do my job because that's why you're paying me. And you need to sell to them why you'd be a good fit. So in my interview, what I did was outlined my plan to do just that. Here's exactly how I would get meetings for you. I would start by identifying my ideal customer profile. So who is the company's ideal customer profile? I went on their website and researched their current customers. And I'd say, well, based on your current customers, this is the profile I'm seeing. I then went on the website and looked at the testimonials of those customers. Okay, so it tends to, you work with the director of L&D. So I'd reach out to the L&D. Okay, what messaging would I use to reach out to them? So in the situation of a cold call, this is what I'd say. For a cold email, this is what I would say. Here's how I would think about day-to-day activity. And then as far as getting on the meeting, I even pitched my value prop. So based on researching those different data points from the company website, I listened to an hour podcast of the founder, and then I pitched the product. It wasn't great, but it demonstrated that I could learn, and I already understood the mission of the company, who the customer was, who the buyer persona was, what problem we were solving. That is what I tried to demonstrate in the video. And that's what you're doing in the sales job. That's what you're doing to sell yourself to get the sales job.
Yes.
It's all the same process. And it's just demonstrating that because that's what you'll be doing in the job. I was sitting there and my mic, the way I recorded it, it was like blurring in and out. It was low production quality. I did one run and I didn't care about it, but I just knew once they saw that, they would say he went above and beyond of what normal effort would be. Therefore, there were hundreds of applicants. They required 10 years of experience. I have half that. I still got the interview.
More often than not, every single company right now is offering referral bonuses just because they've done away with recruiters and sourcers and usually only have like one or nobody there and the hiring managers are doing the role. So they're relying even more on the referrals. So if you've applied for anything and you like the company, go back and see if you have a connection or a connection in there that can walk you in, because those referrals are going to be the fastest way for you to get in there and get a job.
And I can validate at the enterprise level. There was a student I worked with that I helped get a job at Snowflake, which, you know, is a great company. And he said of all the SDRs on the floor, I know there's 130 SDRs. I don't know if it's like globally or his division. But he said like him and one other person didn't have warm connections. Everyone else was referred. So whether it's the startup level, the enterprise level, it's a thing.
I think networking is your number one most important thing that you have to be able to do in order to get a job in today's world. It is vital. You need to know people.
That's a great, again, another mic drop line. We've had quite a few of those and more to come, I'm sure. So especially for a sales role. You know, it's
especially for a sales role.
And that's the beauty of sales, like the SDR role. If you don't have like a fancy pedigree with a top university or past experience, if you can show your real world resume that you can actually do the job in action, that is powerful, because some people are really good at telling a story on the resume, but they're just great at marketing. They don't necessarily have the skills needed to succeed in reality. So, man, I'm so big as well on the importance of networking.
It's just vital.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, and it's not just networking with a recruiter or the hiring manager. It's networking everywhere you go. Or if you're standing at Starbucks, you start talking to the people around you. Talk to everybody, because you never know who's going to be able to help you. And everyone you talk with, make sure you connect with them on LinkedIn, because that's your network. That's how you start building. The more people you're connected with, the more people that can see you, the more people that you can tap into saying, hey, I know we don't know each other, but we're really good friends with, Chris. Would you mind walking me in here? Well, yeah, if you're friends with Chris is only friends with rock stars, so absolutely. Sometimes your network will work for you that way. Like we have people now, like last time I looked for a job was about 10 years ago. Your network is vital. And the more you build your network with people that you meet, or we're talking networking events, meetups, happy hours, there's places in Austin. We have so many coffee shops here in Austin, like Mozart's.
Yes.
You want a network? Go to Mozart's Monday through Friday, any time of the day, and you will have executives, you will have fractionals, you will have HR folks just sitting there, and that's what we do. I built my network by literally sitting in a coffee shop for 3 months and just talking to every single person that had a laptop.
That is so good. And I don't know if we've ever hit it on that in our 100+ podcasts on this channel, of the power of not just intentionally networking on LinkedIn and outbounding to SDRs, AEs, hiring managers, and recruiters at companies you want to work at, but opening yourself up to the possibilities of going out in the world.
People forget about real life.
Like real life, like especially if you live in a city like Austin, you go to like coffee shops, and to your point, you could have executives that are grabbing coffee right alongside you. You start a conversation, you don't even know it. You figure out what they do. Turns out, you share that, hey, wow, like that sounds really interesting. I'd love to potentially work for you. And maybe they can just get you right in the door to the recruiter and pass you along. And I was on Congress Avenue walking with a guy that actually had reached out through my channel. We took initiative and he wanted to talk tech sales. And we saw someone with a cyber truck, and the guy said, hey, check it out. And it turned out that all of a sudden he starts talking about how they're hiring at Tesla, and he got the contact information. So
Tesla's always hiring, FYI, if anyone's looking for a job right now.
Yeah.
Hot.
And that was a little different though, because it's on like the assembly line.
Yep.
And he seems like open to it, but I think he realized he wants to more so like get into tech sales. But it's still an example.
And the thing is, though, so many
possibilities.
people have forgotten about IRL
Yes,
in real life.
In real life. I love IRL.
Everyone is just, pre-pandemic, everything was in real life. We'd pick up a phone and we'd call you instead of text you. And like, it was more interactive. And then the pandemic hit, everyone went isolated and everyone went online, which is really, really helpful. But people forgot how to talk to other people, or that the world actually exists outside of what's on your phone and your computer. And the networking is so important. I mean, I can connect and network with anybody on LinkedIn, but they don't know me. They haven't been able to have a conversation with me. They don't know if I'm articulate. They don't know, if I drop the F-bomb, which I don't, but I sometimes do all the time. They don't know if I'm client facing.
Yes.
On social media or on LinkedIn. But if you see me on LinkedIn after I chatted with you at a coffee shop, they're like, oh, I remember her. Her energy was really, really high.
Yes.
We should talk with her.
Yes.
My energy is what gets me in the door a lot of the times, and you can't get that on LinkedIn.
One more networking thing is
Okay.
I'm so big on it is like if we were to reach out to you, you're a hiring manager at a company or recruiter, and it was cold and it's via LinkedIn because maybe the company is based somewhere else. What might the message look like? A message that just high level the content and how it might be framed in a way that might catch your attention and be like, oh, okay, this person has something to bring to the table. They're actually interested. I'd love your high level thoughts.
Yeah, so there's two ways of doing it. Most people are going to use LinkedIn Connect because they don't have enough credits on Messenger to send you a message. So you're working on like 3-sentence max on a LinkedIn Connect. Say hi with the person's name so they know it's not just a copy and paste spam. So it's like, hey, Kaylin, saw that you have this job posted with the job title at this company or wherever. Would love an opportunity to chat with you about it. Are you free Tuesday, Thursday, this time? Do an assumptive close.
Beautiful.
Have the assumptive close. Like, here's my availability. I'm going to make it easy for you to tell me when I can talk to you. If it's in a message and you have LinkedIn credit or you have somebody's email address, subject line, title of the role, and then make sure in the body of the email, if you're not connected with anybody, just say, I was online, saw this job, did a little bit of research in your company, saw that this is your mission, this is your values, this is my jam. You're right up with what I want. Find something that shows that A, you've researched the company, and B, that you are the person that has the right mindset that they want to bring in. That's going to open the door. And then once the conversation has, it's up to you to sell yourself based on that criteria. But you have to find common ground. The common ground is really going to be helpful if it's not a face-to-face interaction.
Let's talk about prospecting to land a job.
Yeah.
I think that we can actually show a real world resume by thoughtfully reaching out to even executive like you to show authentic interest and maybe get referred to the recruiter. But that's what I think. And I feel like I'm the type of guy who would do that. However, I wanted to get your honest perspective being the VP. Do you think that's a good idea for someone who's very committed to breaking in? They really want to work at whether it's QuickBase or your future company or past company, and they want to reach out to you. Do you think that actually could be a good strategy? And if so, is there a way to do it that is appropriate and makes a good impression?
Yeah. Yes, it's a good idea. Maybe other VPs are different for me, but in SDR land, we're never not hiring SDRs.
Yep.
We're always hiring. And so any person that has reached out to me over LinkedIn or like guessed on my email because they like got a screen with our recruiter, or like has a friend of a friend that like in the company and like came and referred, like I've always gone to our recruiter or my management team and like, hey, has anyone talked to this person? Like, do they know? Because like, it actually makes a difference. Like we get a lot of resumes at QuickBase, they get a lot of people coming in wanting SDR jobs. So like, yeah, just the people that actually take time, like there's actually a few people of the folks that like raise their hand and fill out an application that like ping me. And I always actually ask where they're at. And like, cool, like how's the screen? Or like, can we get them on a call? Cause like they applied 3 days ago, just because they took the effort. So that's me. I like, because looking for a job and like interviewing for an SDR job is basically, you should do it like you would be an SDR. Like I'm trying to sell them on myself the way that and I'm going to show them how I'm going to sell myself the way I would sell their product when I worked for them. So the people that are persistent and trying to build a buying committee as like the executive stakeholder, I'm on the buying committee. I may not be in the first several rounds of your interview, but you're going to meet me eventually. And I got the veto card. So you want to make a good impression.
Okay, I wanted to know the role you play in the process. So you're saying you'll be in the later stages.
Yeah.
It's like in Pokemon where you meet the Grand Master, you know,
Yeah.
like if you ever play the game and like you're the levels and you have veto power. Now, who's actually making the decision though? Are you empowering your hiring managers to make the ultimate decision? Can you speak to how that works?
Yeah. QuickBase has been shifting a few things like recently and kind of growing and kind of expanding our path. So I was getting to the point at the end where I'm just hearing like who the manager and the director want to hire. So QuickBase has like 6 SDR teams, 2 directors. And so like they're running through the most of the process. But when we were building our process, I would always be on the panel interviews. And so it's just the last 6 months that had kind of changed. But I would be in the panel. So they'd go through like a recruiter screen. They'd go through a manager screen and mock call, a couple of assessments that we have to do, and then they do a panel. And so they're meeting me and the directors at that point. So a few steps to get there. And so they have to kind of pass a few different tests at that point. And like if we're getting a lot of resumes in, if you haven't like heard back on your resume and it's been a couple of days, you reaching out to people on the management team is a great tip to like, because they just haven't even seen it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard back from your resume, like, are you saying you're cold applying, or maybe you had a networking conversation with you, or either way, if you haven't?
Either way. Yeah.
Interesting. And so you would say reach out to the hiring manager or the recruiter, like, or specifically
I think both. For us, all of the resumes would go through like our like application like tracking system first. So like it has to pass that, and then it goes through a recruiter, and they're getting a lot of them. So like anyone that the hiring manager is curious about will usually get us bumped to the top of the list for like who we talk to. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. That's a nugget that I hadn't heard of, is if you don't hear back, just check in with the hiring manager and be that squeaky wheel. And it's good, again, to get some validation from you being at the top that that's actually appropriate and encouraged.
How should we think about the recruiters? Because I think y'all are our biggest champions and partner in the interview process. So let's talk about that.
Okay, first of all, the way you're thinking, I love you and I appreciate it because that's true. Every single person I've ever talked in talent management, talent acquisition, and recruiting, yes, there's 3 different things and they all mean a little bit different.
Interesting.
All hire people, but everyone that I've ever found within those areas, we did not actively go out to have that job. It's something that we've really just kind of fell into because of the kind of personalities we have. And so for us, we are yay you. We, like, if you see my calendar, you've seen my calendar. I am like booked a month in advance because.
Can't believe we got in your calendar.
I know.
Yes.
Because I take every call.
Yeah.
If you want to talk to me, absolutely. I will talk to you because I want you to know that there's somebody out there that gives a damn about you. But I also want to seem like, do you have skill sets that can help my companies? So it benefits us both to have a conversation. Yeah. But as a recruiter, like if we put you into an interview process, we are your biggest advocate. We are your biggest cheerleader. Like we are talking and prepping you and boosting you up behind the scenes. We are bragging to the hiring manager. We were talking to the panelists. We're like, this is the right person. We are an advocate for you. We are not the bad guy. We are not here to filter people out. We're here to filter people in, is truly what we do. It's not, we don't want to kick people to the curb. We want as many people in the pipeline as we possibly can. There are the bad ones out there that have an issue with ghosting. A lot of times, though, that's not the recruiter, it's the company policy. And a lot of people don't understand that. So whenever I'm in the company, my policy is everyone gets a touch. So even if it's a rejection, even if it's a canned rejection, everyone gets a message so you're not left hanging. Some companies truly have the hiring philosophy of we only reach out to the positives. We don't touch the negatives. So you could get ghosted. And that always sucks. Or if a recruiter calls you and says, hey, I will follow up with you or expect an offer, follow up, be pleasantly persistent. Do not wait for them.
Yes.
Because they have a lot on their plate. There's a lot on our plates other than just one offer that we're trying to track down for you or some feedback that we're trying to track down. Like, we're executive coaches. We're in charge of a lot of the budgets. We're head of HR sometimes. I mean, we're a catch-all for a lot of different things. So it is okay for you to be pleasantly persistent with us. And by that, I mean annoy the F out of us if that's what it takes for you to get the answer you need.
So, what does that pleasant persistence look like? For example, you say that, hey, we'll get back to you on the next interview round or something like that within a couple days. Like, does that mean like maybe if they said 2 days, you reach out on the third if you haven't heard or fourth? Like, you just practically, what does it look like?
Yes, think of it like dating. If you had a really good date and you say, hey, I'm going to go tell my parents about you. And then we're going to have dinner in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And it's day 2 and it should be dinner tonight and I don't hear from you. I'm going to call you.
Yeah.
Be like, yo, I need to know, should I eat or are you going to feed me? Same thing with recruiting, applying for jobs, you're dating.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
it's
think
the same
about
with sales too. I always say sales and dating, it's the same thing.
Sales and dating is the same thing because it's a dance. It's a little bit of give and take.
You're saying be pleasantly persistent, which is actually a phrase I use too. I think when I heard you say that in your talk in South by Southwest.
And the thing and it's not nagging. It's not pestering. If you have pestering in your vernacular, get rid of it. You're being pleasantly persistent, not pester.
Yeah.
And if somebody says, hey, I'll follow up in 2 days, you give them till that I usually get end of business day is 5 for most people. I give them until 4:30. If I don't hear from them after they said 2 days and it's day 2, call them, email them. It is okay to do that. Hold us accountable. Because if we told you it's like, hey, I want this in 2 days and we don't get it, it's going to reflect very poorly on you because you had a deadline. So if I have a deadline and I'm not meeting it, hold me accountable.
Let's blow up the belief that, I'm being annoying. It's like, no, you're being persistent and you're showing the qualities needed in the role.
You're showing the qualities that we want to see. You're showing passion. You're showing interest. If you're in sales, you're showing that you don't take no or quiet as an answer because no is never an answer. When a recruiter, and we are honest, we are brutally honest with you because we don't want to be annoyed. So listen to when we say, it's like, hey, I don't have anything just yet. Follow up with me in 4 weeks. And then you proceed to call me twice a week leading up to that 4 weeks.
No. Oh, no.
No.
You got a timeline.
Yeah, I gave you a timeline. And listen, like recruiters, we will tell you, it's like, we're not hiring this role now, but we're going to be hiring in Q4. Follow up with us mid Q3 because that's when we're starting the interview process. If we need a button seat in Q4, be proactive. Just don't, we give you a timeline, don't pester us before that timeline.
Yeah. By the way, I have a story that I never told you, but getting my job at Google that brought me to Austin, I had a recruiter, Jen, that will always have a place in my heart. She is amazing. We've even had moments where like all of a sudden I'm like, Jen, are you okay? She was crying, but because she watched an amazing video and was like happy crying. It was like adorable. But anyways, with let me try and summarize this quickly. I left my Oracle job prematurely and went into 6 months of voluntary fun employment because Google hit a hiring freeze before I had the official offer. Can you believe that? And so I had made it through the interviews. I just needed their board approvals. And I was so confident that I'm good on paper, went to a top university, and I'm a pretty good marketer, right? And
You quit before the paperwork.
So what I did, though, with my manager, I thought, I'm not going to blindside my boss, Monty. Shout out to Monty, or Ryan Montgomery, but we call him Monty. He's a great manager. I said, hey, like, I want to be transparent. I'm taking a job at Google. Should be getting it in the next 2 weeks. I want to get someone in seat and not blindside. That was ridiculous. I'm like, this is Chris's world. Everyone can win. And so I helped get someone placed in my role, picked a voluntary unemployment date 2 months out, but it dragged its feet. Or like it, meaning like Google. And so I did end up getting the job. But in this story, like, talk about having to build an amazing recruiter relationship.
Yep.
I even did something that you probably shouldn't do. I figured out she loved Blue Bottle coffee and got her some. I probably didn't do
No,
that.
I will tell you.
Okay, so
I've got so many sloths because
Okay.
I do not know how y'all figure out that I collect sloths and
Yeah.
Star Wars stuff.
that story I wanted to tee up because it was pretty crazy and epic, and it did work out. But the importance of following up with the recruiter was so key in building a personal relationship, because when it opened up 6 months later, the dream almost died, but she had my back, and there was such a personal, she wanted me to get it, and she helped me negotiate for a signing bonus that I wanted, where with Google, the negotiation, you're pretty removed.
Yes, and
so it's
leverage
like-
your recruiter for that, because we have all the
Yes,
information.
okay, so let's finish up on the recruiter piece, talking about how to like build that relationship. How can you give them ammo to like sell you better and like be your champion like Jen was for me?
So when a recruiter asks you what your salary range is,
$1 million.
1 million. Could you imagine now in today's world, $1 million? Like, really? That's nothing.
Yeah.
But when it came out, huge.
Yeah.
God, we're getting old. First of all, know your worth before you get on the market.
Yeah.
Know what your salary should honestly be.
Yes.
But the more honest and transparent you are with your recruiter, the more they will have your back. Like, I've always found that I really, really like put myself all in for people that have made a point to make sure I know them, where, I've got one candidate who I've been trying to staff for a while. Her name's Jenny.
Jenny.
Jenny! If y'all need a CS
Shout out.
person, y'all give me a call. She's amazing.
Let's go.
But like Jenny, I had nothing for her, and she didn't want to make herself annoying. So she got to the point where she would send me like random cartoon clips via email. Just sit there and say, I know you don't have anything. I'm waiting for you.
I like
Just
that.
want you to know I'm thinking about you.
That's so sweet.
Anything that you can keep yourself top of mind with, be proactive. We are devastated when a role falls through or when we have an offer that we have to retract because we lost funding. You guys don't understand. I have ugly cried at work. I have dry heaved. I have literally thrown up on a hiring manager because they got me so upset.
Wow.
It's
Epic.
recruiters. I mean,
Emotional roller coaster.
it's an emotional roller coaster because we are personally invested with each candidate that we present forward. Our reputation is attached to each candidate that we present forward. So it behooves you to give us all the information, be honest, be transparent, be clear. If you can't start for a month, say I can't start for a month. It is okay, because I have literally given offers with 3-month extensions in order to lock in a good candidate. You just have to we're your advocate. Don't lie to us and then tell hiring managers something else, because the minute that happens, like if you say one thing to me and I get you in front of the hiring manager and you say something completely different, that hiring manager knows what you told me because I've already shared all my notes. And it's either going to make you look bad or me look bad. But either way, we look bad, we're not going to help you. We don't do well with liars. You have to be transparent with us. And that's a big thing that I think a lot of people looking for a job right now, I think that they're worried about that. Or, I've been riffed 4 times in 3 years and I've been unemployed for 8 months. You and everybody else.
How do you handle that, by the way? That's a good one to double click on.
You and everybody else. Since the pandemic, I have been riffed 4 or 5 times.
Really?
I actually collected more in severance than I did in paychecks.
Wow.
Always ask for a severance, even if they don't offer it. Always ask.
Okay.
Because sometimes we don't give it unless you ask. Just
Are you serious? That is so
inside
important. Oh my gosh, that could make
information.
such a difference for people.
Inside
Great tip.
information.
Great tip. Ask for severance.
Always ask for
in
a
writing.
severance.
In an email,
writing.
I'm
Yes,
assuming. Yeah.
Always. Even when you get an offer, you can negotiate severance, just FYI.
Oh my gosh, what a nugget.
So there you go. But I mean, be honest with us.
Yeah, be honest.
We cannot help you find a job. We will not help you find a job if we find out you lied to me. Like, I have a book of business that I've had for 22 years now that have over 50,000 names. Quite a few. I mean, not quite a few. Like, there's at least 24 in red. That's because they lied. I will never help them staff. And they are in my book to make sure that they've been blacklisted from my book.
Integrity, honesty is so important. That's the foundation of trust in a relationship.
Sir. Our candidates represent who we are as people, as recruiters, as people. And if you show up in a bad light, we're not going to help you.
Like, once you get your foot in the door and you have the interview, I don't think the resume is as important unless there's glaring deficiencies or something, which there usually isn't. It's more once you get to that interview, that's where they're really going to make their decision. The resume kind of goes, I don't want to say out the door, but someone could have a better resume than another candidate. But if that other candidate with the subpar resume compared to one interviews way better, most managers are going to go with the one where their gut is like, that's who I want to hire.
When you're trying to get into these companies, there's going to be the initial phone screening, which you apply, you get a phone screening, typically with a low-level recruiter. If you pass that or whatever criteria they have, you'll advance on to meeting with a sales manager or some leader of some sort. And then you may have a third interview with another sales leader or some manager regardless. So as you think about advancing in those steps, it's just like a sales cycle. The goal is progression. The goal is to get from application to phone screening to whatever is next step in their interview process to offer. That is the progression. So think about it in terms of how many applications have I done? How many interviews have I gotten? How many applications have I sent that have not resulted in interviews? So have I even heard back? Have I gotten rejected? And then how many of the interview cycles you've started have resulted in an actual offer? So you can start to quantify it like that and know that those are your metrics.
Yep.
Those are your success metrics. If you apply to 100 companies and you get 2 interviews, you have a 2% conversion rate there. What can you do to improve that conversion rate? If you're committed to the outcome, you'll keep going even if it takes you a year to get the job. So many people. I spoke with a guy the other day and he had just moved to a city. He's like, I got to get a job to pay rent. And I know I'm settling, but I have to get a job. You don't want to put yourself in a situation like that where you have to settle for a job or an industry you don't actually want to be in. It was kind of sad to listen to. So that's another point about structuring your life in a way. But those are the metrics that matter to get it. And the way I like to think about it is you are there it's an audition, and most people think in terms of people are working against them, or it wasn't fair. I didn't like the vibe there. The people you're speaking with, the recruiter, how do they get paid? Their incentive is to hire quality candidates, and for those candidates to stay at the company 6 months. They want you to succeed. Think about that. They want you to succeed. So how do you help them succeed? You prove to them that you're the best candidate for the role. So you got to really understand the company, the product they sell, how they make money, their competitors, have specific examples of stories to point to that align with their current cultural values, that align with their expected sales process. So these are all table stakes. And if you don't know or you're not doing these things, then there's no way you will be able to differentiate yourself against someone like myself or Chris, who knows how to do these things. You got to be able to do it.
Do your research. And by that, I mean, know who you're talking to. No, even if it's a recruiter, know who your audience is, because a lot of times people will just want to be like, okay, so what's your role within this company? I'm like, okay, well, I don't work for that company. There's one example. So know who your audience is, because it puts you in a much more positive light, because guess what? Before we talk to you, we've stalked you. Before I pick up the phone and have a conversation with you, I've looked at your social media. I've looked at your Facebook. I looked at your Twitter. I've looked at your LinkedIn. I see if you If you're on YouTube, what type of content do you put out? Is this something that I want to be associated with? If you're we stalk you. We already know your background before we have a conversation with you. Do us a little bit of respect and know who we are when you talk to us, because we're going to assume that you are showing up for us the way you would show up for a hiring manager. And if I present you to my hiring manager, which is usually a founder or a CEO, you damn well better know who that person is, what their company does. Have a basic understanding of who the company is, who they are, what they do, and why they do it. When you and I first talked, you were a cold outreach, but yeah, you were like, I saw this and I saw this and I'm really excited about this. I'm like, okay.
I saw you have an adorable Frenchie.
You saw you have an adorable Frenchie, which by the way is the easiest way to get to my heart.
Yeah, and seriously, and I have my puppy Bella, no question. And also the YouTube. You, by the way, I had a candidate I was interviewing for my company Bespin, and they mentioned my YouTube, and they buttered me up, and I was like, I like this person.
Right? You mentioned my fur, my dog. We're good.
Yeah.
It's like you've done your homework. Just show up the way we show up. If you show up and it's a Zoom call, have your camera on, have audio ready to go. Because if I have to dress up for you from the waist up, you need to dress up for me from the waist up.
I mean, take it serious. Dress professionally.
Dress professionally.
It's different at every company, but generally a lot of times there's a screening interview with like a recruiter, and then you have a couple interviews with different managers. It could be 2, it could be 3, and then ultimately a decision is made. And I tell people, like when I talk to people who are planning on interviewing, or whether it's Oracle or not interviewing, not to overcomplicate it. I don't mean to come off the wrong way. I think the bar is pretty low. I've done a lot of these interviews, and I think a lot of people overthink the interview preparation process and start preparing for these really specific questions. If you can nail some very basic questions, I think you can take control and win just about every interview. So no matter the tech company. And for example, like 2 of the biggest questions you want to have good answers for right out of the gate are just, you're probably going to get asked, why do you want to go into sales, and why do you want to do so at this company? Or it's going to be some variation of a very high level, like, tell me about yourself, or what led you to this interview? Why do you want to go into sales? Why do you want to work for this company?
Yes.
And I think under the hood, what that question is really saying is, show me what you got, or sell yourself, because that's your chance to knock it out of the park and take control. Because you can win the interview in the first 5 minutes if you nail those questions. But if you aren't prepared for very simple questions like that right out of the gate, the manager is going to be questioning, well, how are they going to prepare for their day-to-day role on the job, or prepare for customer calls or things like that? So I think people often overcomplicate the interview process, and they spend way too much time worrying about things like their cold call role play, if they're going to end up doing one. Because in reality, most cold call role plays don't sound good. Like it's hard to do mock cold calls, like to make them sound like actual cold calls. And most people haven't done this before, so most people don't sound good.
Yeah.
Like more what they want to see is, did you prepare or try? Can you take feedback when they give it to you on those cold call role plays? But I think it's simple things. Like if you can nail your answer for why you're here, essentially, why do you want to go in sales, and why do you want to do so at this company? That's the quickest way out of the gate to really take control of the interview. And you'll see the manager's eyes light up if you start knocking those answers out of the park.
I really believe that's the cornerstone question. It's like, why do you want to be here?
Yeah.
And I am just a very passionate guy. It's my wiring. And I tend to, I come in with passion and a twinkle in my eye. And that's partly because I'm intentional in everything I do in my career and my life. And I think hiring managers love that. You can validate that having managed people, but are there any other nuances beyond having maybe a passion in your answer in terms of like how to frame your why? And I realize you said keep it simple, so I don't want to overanalyze, but any other thoughts on a strong why you want to work here?
Yeah, it's different for different people. And I agree, for the SDR role, it's a role where a lot of people haven't done the skill set. Like a lot of people haven't made cold calls when they're interviewing for the SDR role. So they're really more looking for personality, character traits. Is this someone I can develop? I mean, why sales? Or like you more want to show off at a high level your preparation, like what you've done. Have you put thought into this? Have you researched the company? So I think you can start talking about things. I mean, for me, I think when I was interviewing, I remember I talked about how like you, I'm someone who's passionate. I work very hard. I like the idea of a performance-based career. I like the idea that the harder I work and the more effort I put in, the more I'll likely be rewarded from both an income standpoint and a career standpoint. And not only that, I want to do it at a company I believe in. I want to be on the right horse in the right industry. I think the tech industry has a lot of growth ahead of it. This move from on-premise to cloud has a decade plus runway of growth ahead of it. And I think X company, in my case, it was Oracle, has a great market position in that transition. So I'm excited because I think I'm going to get great experience at a market leading company and can develop my career. And I would touch on things like that. I just did that off
that,
the dome.
hey, that, by the way, that was great. And obviously you've been in this space for a while now, but that was crisp. And you sounded like a business professional the way you said that. Like you did your homework and you were very intentional. Like this, I want to be on the right horse, and something like that you said. I love that. I love that line.
You'll get asked, what are you going to bring to the table? Or why are you a good candidate? Things like that. You can weave these into all of your answers and almost reuse them for different questions you get, just saying it in a different way. But yeah, you're talk about how you're someone who's going to come in, work hard. I'm going to show up early, stay late, do whatever it takes. And I'm looking for feedback. I know you've succeeded here. You've obviously had a great career and gotten to the point where you're in management. And I want to learn from someone like you and hopefully get to the point where I can take what I've learned once I'm succeeding and help your whole team and your organization. Boom. And just touch on those three. I think if you're hitting those three, it's a safe bet. Like that's what I look for. And I don't think there's a manager who wouldn't want those three things. So I try and weave those into any answer I can.
I love that you wove in subtle flattery and it was authentic. You're like, clearly you've been successful. I want to work under someone like you. And that's exactly what I did. That right there is a great insight. And
yeah. And you can even add in, like maybe I was just using a fake example there, but maybe you checked out their LinkedIn and you referenced something on their LinkedIn. I saw you went from this role to this role to this role. And that's the career path I'm thinking about taking. And I want to learn from someone like you. And that's another, again, you're demonstrating your preparation. You are subtly demonstrating, I went on your LinkedIn and that's what I'll do when I'm prospecting and holding meetings with customers. And the manager might not even consciously think all this stuff, but it's going to hit them. They're going to be like, oh, this person showed up ready. Yeah. Like they're probably going to show up ready on the job too.
You hit on a key insight. The way you prepare for interviews is how you'll prepare for your cold calls in the actual role.
What's your angle, right? Like, you create that story of why you want to get into tech sales that's differentiated from just some fake idea of making money, right? And then now from there, is it the leadership team? Is it the renowned sales training program and brand of Oracle? Is it something specific about the tech that's really well differentiated from its competitors? There's no one answer. In an ideal world, maybe you can answer a 15-second blurb about each of those, but at a minimum, showing up to one. You create that story of why you want to break into tech sales. And candidly, like based on my computer science experience, I've really wanted to go into this database space. Whatever database company, what really intrigued me about you is how well differentiated you are from this. Or, I really love the training that you've had. I noticed your CRO started here as an SDR, as an example, right? Like something like that. These are the types of threads you can pull that really show a lot of interest with also not being like desperate, like your company's the greatest. I've done so much research. I love what you guys do. It's like you have just really succinct and concise reasons why.
But it's all about showing very clear intention, showing up prepared, and demonstrating that you can do the job day one. You're going to come in and be an immediate impact player, even though maybe you're really rough, you have a lot of development left, but you have a lot of desire to come in and be an immediate impact player and show that you have the aspirations of developing in that program, maybe becoming a leader one day, and forecasting how you see your future playing out with that company. And that's very important.
Don't we all have a lot of development left?
People who are precise with like their goals and definitive about what they want come across as more competent. And so like if you show up to an interview and you're like, and they're like, what do you want in your next role? Or what are some of your goals? And you're just kind of like, I don't know. I just like, want to find a good company to work for. Doesn't matter if I'm an SDR or CSM or an engineer, whatever. I just want to find a good company. I would never hire somebody who answered like that. Like, it's just too fuzzy versus like the world gets out of the way of the person who knows exactly what he or she wants. Right. So like if somebody's like, tell me about some of your goals and your hopes and your dreams, and you're like, well, what time frame are we talking? Because I have all of that very well defined. They're like, all right, tell me where you want to be in 20 years. You're like, CEO of my own company doing $500 million a year in ARR. Okay, what about 10 years? Senior director of sales making $350,000 a year at probably like a Series B to Series D tech company. Okay, what do you want next? An SDR at a fintech company, because I'm very interested in financial technology and I want to rise through the ranks in a sales leadership career, right? Like that's an extreme example, and very few people are going to be able to answer with that clarity. But like, can you imagine like a hiring manager hearing that from somebody and being like, this person is going places, versus like everybody else who's like, yeah, I don't really know what I want to do. Like this weekend, I want to go get drunk with my friends. That's about all I know.
Chris, like you've given me chills multiple times. I know it sounds funny, but like your level of intentionality is powerful, and that's how you convert dreams into reality. And I will say, like when I ended up working for Google Cloud, which I worked there for a few years before joining a startup, I'm at a cloud agnostic consultancy now. I wrote on a piece of paper why Google, why I wanted to move to Austin, Texas. And I also visualized myself with a smile on my face in the office, getting commission checks. And so to your point on intentionality, that is huge. And if you can communicate that to an interviewer, it's powerful. I love that you said, like, what time frame are we thinking? That would have blown me away. It's like, you know, and so
different goals for different time frames. Like if you ask me what I want to accomplish this year, it's going to be different than what I want to accomplish in 10 years. And if you have that same level of definition, not only will you interview better, but you'll just be more successful, right? Goal orientation. I'm pretty sure there's like a ton of studies that prove successful people have goals, very well-defined goals.
I was interviewing for my current company, again, a cloud consultancy, and someone, first round interview, asked like, how did you hear about us? Or like, why do you want to work here? And he said, I hired a virtual assistant to send out resumes to companies. Like, it was basically the most random approach. Immediately, like, there's no shot. We're going to bring you on. We're trying to build a vision. We're trying to IPO. We're trying to do these things. And so that's just a funny non-example, and tying back into your point, you know, can you
think about what that communicates? It communicates, I just want a job.
Yeah.
It's not like, especially like startups are only going to hire people who are like bought in on the vision. You don't have to be like drinking the Kool-Aid, but you need to want to work at that company specifically, because like it's painful to work at startups sometimes. Like you have to work. It's going to own a piece of you. So there is a concept in hiring called behavioral interviewing. And any sales manager or hiring manager who's been around for more than a few years has at least caught wind of what behavioral interviewing is. And behavioral interviewing is when you ask a question that is designed to get recent behavior out of a person in their answer. So I'll give you an example. Let's say one of my hiring criteria is grit, right? I want to hire people who have the capability of working very hard, that are passionate and are willing to run through walls. A bad question that a sales manager will ask is like, how gritty are you? Because you can bullshit your way through it. You can be like, dude, I'm so gritty. Like,
such a BS.
So a behavioral interview will be like, tell me about a time where you worked harder than you ever have. And why, and what was driving you. And you give a good story, right? You're like, well, I left a well-paying job to start a company called Conversature. I had 3 years of cash in the bank and we needed to make it work. And I worked harder than I ever have during that 18-month period. I would wake up at 4 a.m. every day to prospect. I would do a podcast every day to start building an audience. This is my story with Conversature.
Yes.
And I'm giving an example. And now, like, this has a few benefits. Number one, you have showcased that you've displayed that behavior. You're not just pontificating, you've demonstrated it. But number two, hiring managers remember stories. Not just hiring managers, people remember stories much more than just facts. And so if a hiring manager is asking you a question and it's obvious what they're asking about, like what trait they're asking for, coachability, grit, whatever, try to give a recent example of you using that behavior, right? If somebody's like, how coachable are you? Instead of just saying super coachable, be like, well, let me tell you a story from last week that'll illustrate how coachable I am. And if you can tell a story, then, I mean, that's music to a hiring manager's ears because
Yeah.
it's
Go ahead.
behavior.
Yeah, immediately my impression was like, I have no doubt in my mind this person has the experience, and I want to ask more about this. Any advice on how to package the story in a compelling way? Because you did it, you showed us an example, but any, like, in theory, how to think about that?
I think there's advanced ways to talk about stories, but I almost don't want to give them to people because I think most people are just going to convolute it, right? Like, I don't want to give you like the 5 steps to compelling storytelling. Just go tell a story, like make it a real story. If you do that, you will be ahead of just about everybody else you're interviewing.
And that's the takeaway right there, is don't overthink it. Chris, I have an analytical brain, and I've seen in the past early on in my career where I overanalyzed and I over-rehearsed. And then maybe I seemed a little too performative. So thanks for that insight as well.
For the SDR role, one of the questions is, what's your cold call methodology? How do you handle no? That's a big thing. How do you handle no? So you're saying there's a chance. So you're saying no right now, but that's not no tomorrow. That's when you're just like, all right, that's where the sale begins. ABC of closing. ABCs? You know the ABC of closing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Always be closing.
Always
so
be closing.
If somebody says no, it's just like not at this minute is what that means. It does not mean no forever. No, I hate you. Go jump off a cliff. It's just like, no, my dog died this morning. I'm getting a divorce. Somebody peed in my lemonade. I just don't want to talk right now. That's what no means. Just no at this moment. Same thing. So that's going to be one of the
great examples.
Feel free to use that answer.
Great examples. I like that you not only said the question but gave examples.
Yes, feel free to use that answer.
What else would you add that is like absolutely critical for this role?
How would you navigate a gatekeeper? We always get that one. Be friends with the gatekeeper. Treat the gatekeeper like you would a recruiter.
You probably run the show around here. I was hoping you could help me out.
Yes. Yes. I don't want to waste.
Special.
I don't want, and make every call. And the thing is, though, it's like, what is the secret to your success? Every dial counts.
Every dial counts.
Take that answer to the bank. You're welcome for your offer. Every
these nuggets are
dial
great.
counts. And that means, like, if you call and you get an operator, you can confirm with the operator, hey, I just want to make sure before you transfer me, is this the right address? Is this where you're located? Okay, I have this person listed. Is this really their title? Okay, are they really the right person that I need to talk to about
you want
this?
To get to the right
They're
person.
not. Okay, can you please help me find the right person so I don't waste somebody's time? Absolutely.
Yes, so I don't waste someone's time.
So
That's
I don't
like
waste
you're trying
somebody's
to be respectful of them.
Yep.
And of course, like some fundamentals like why do you want to work here? What will you bring to the table? Things like that.
When I started interviewing people, I looked at, I would Google top questions to ask a sales candidate or something like that. And inevitably on number 1 on every list is, make the candidate pitch you the product. Make them sell you your own software. See how they would do if they had to give an elevator pitch or be in a demo meeting with a prospect or whatever it is. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And so I would do that for, a year or so and probably dozens of interviews. And I asked the question, I listened to the answers, and I was like, what did I just learn? Basically, all I learned was how good can you go to Clary.com, read a handful of pages, and then parrot back something that you learn. And yeah, okay, research is useful, and that may be cool, but it wasn't ever super revealing about the candidate. I didn't find that answer to be predictive of their success in my role or at our company. And so I totally shut down that line of questioning from my arsenal. And instead, I was like, I wonder what will happen if instead of asking them to pitch me my product, I'm going to ask them to pitch me their passion. And let's see what happens. And so instead of them talking about a technology that they don't know a ton about, and SDR candidates a lot of times are either new to technology or it's their first sales role in general, you're not going to get a lot from them when you ask them to pitch you the product. But if I ask you, Chris, like, tell me about the thing in life that when you're doing it, you lose track of time. Tell me about the thing in your life that you want to evangelize that. You tell your friends and family about that. You annoy them because you're talking so much about it. Like, talk to me about that. And their response is the same as your response now. Like, their eyes light up, the smile comes, they think about it for a second, and then they launch in to this diatribe about fitness or basketball or free will or whales or homemade ice cream. All of these things are real examples, by the way.
Yeah.
And we talk about those things. And I probe them and I ask questions and I follow up and I get them to unpack why this is such a meaningful thing in their life. And when those conversations go well, I think to myself, man, you just got excited about that. Now all I have to do is get you excited about my technology. And I'm confident that that passion that you bring to this area of your life can be translated into a business context and into an SDR sales context. And that's been the best predictor for me of somebody's potential future than pretty much anything else out there. How well do they communicate? How excited can they get about something? And how crisply can they articulate why that thing in their life is so meaningful to them? Now, the flip side of that is also true. If I ask somebody this question and they're unable to fire themselves up, or they don't have that spark, or they don't bring that energy, it's probably not the best fit for the role. So that's been a huge unlock for me. And it's gotten our team, our SDR teams that we've built, to be wildly diverse in a really interesting and eclectic way. And I made the change many years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago now. Never look back.
Yeah, I think at the SDR level, there's really 3 questions you should prepare yourself for, which is like, tell me about yourself, why tech sales, and why this company. That certainly at the recruiting level is or the first round, kind of screening call is what you're really going to need to prepare for. And from there, it's just building on that story with the SDR manager as an example. Like, for instance, and cut me off if I get too deep, right? But those 3 questions will prepare you to do well in the recruiter interview. As the recruiter gives you the thumbs up, tells the sales manager why they're passing you through. Now you still want to be prepared to answer those questions, and they're going to ask you so you can say it to them specifically. But now it becomes more of a dialogue and kind of question and answer, and really controlling the conversation. Like, the SDR manager is going to be the one that has answers about the tech, or the SDR manager is the one that's going to be more equipped to tell you about their training program and what it looks like from 0 to 6 months into the job, right? And so if you're coming in prepared to, in the SDR manager interview or the second round, to really have those have those questions ready, but foster that conversation around the opportunity at hand. What are, towards the end of the interview, what are things, if you've hired an engineer before, what do you expect I should overcome? Tell me more about like some of the biggest success stories and failures of your training program. That's one of the biggest reasons I'm attracted to your company in the first place, right? So I could go on and on, but that I think it shifts over time from being very transactional at that first round to really still being prepared with all that information, but also being prepared to drive a conversation around the technology, about the program, about the company you're interviewing with as you go further down that funnel.
When we look at interviewing, also you'll get some, behavioral and role related questions. Like, obviously a lot of these programs, like I know Dell in particular, like, and startups, like anyone, is looking for coachability. So like you might get a question, tell me about a time you received a piece of feedback and how you implemented it, or something along those lines, or tell me about a time you failed. I remember, this is for my interview at Google, and it was for an inside sales role. So I don't know if you get this in an SDR role, but like, tell me about a time you disagreed with someone and had to, change their mind, or you resolved a conflict. But are there any, in terms of behavioral questions beyond some of those that I'm mentioning, you absolutely got to prepare? Because I know there's a lot of flavors and we could open up a can of worms, but
yeah, no, you bring up a great point, and I think it's definitely worth calling out some common ones there, because you will see that. And I would say 50+% of SDR interviews in the later stages. And certainly as an account executive, you're going to get those all the time. I think to your point, like a time you received harsh feedback is a very common question. A time you disagreed with a colleague. Tell me about a time. I had a good question actually when I interviewed this past year at a couple places. It was, tell me about a time when you achieved your peers, which was an interesting one, because I'd never been asked a question that kind of point blank. And, who's to say what they were looking for? It went well, but it's an interesting question because you have to be willing to kind of vouch for yourself without also being like, yeah, everyone else sucked. I'm so great. You know,
Yeah,
so
no, you're so right. You're so right, by the way. Like, yeah, you have to find a way of like showing confidence and being your own advocate from a place of also like balancing it out with humility. I actually got this at Oracle for my SDR role, like, and this is over 9 years ago. You're given a list of accounts, you know, some greenfield, some install, meaning they don't buy from you, and some current customers. How do you prioritize, and like, what do you do to reach out, right? Or like you might, so all I'm saying, we don't really have time to dig into it, is you could, right, get questions like that, or like, how would you do a cold call, like walk through a cold call script? So more so maybe just like throwing out some of the high level questions you might get in like that are role specific. And these are more advanced, of course.
Sure.
But yeah.
No, I think you bring up a great point. I think the inclination and a lot of those questions, when you get to these more complex questions that are hypotheticals, let's use the one of you get a territory, right? You get a territory, it's 50% existing users that you want to grow. It's 50% greenfield accounts. How do you plan your territory? I think the amateur is going to feel the need to answer that right away. Whereas I actually think within reason, management would appreciate clarifying questions, right? Like, okay, so you have existing users. What products are they using? Like in the case of an Oracle, right? Oracle has tons of different products.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, right? So like, what is the typical user that I'm inheriting? Are they using this product? Are we typically seeing growth patterns by growing seats there? Is that an easy motion? Are we seeing trends that if they're using this product that, you know, all 50 of my accounts have, is there a logical upsell with a different vertical or a different product that makes a lot of sense once they've onboarded with this initial technology? These are the types of clarification questions you can ask, and then with a more educated viewpoint, come in and say, well, hey, here's how I'm thinking about it, right? Greenfield, as we know, pure outbound is typically the most difficult. And I'm not going to neglect that by any means, but given, you know, we have users that we typically see 25% year over year growth with this core product that they've already bought. That's where I'm going to start right away. I want to make a point in month one, or as soon as I'm onboarded with the training, to go after all these accounts and make sure we've identified any low hanging fruit and opportunities for growth, right? From there, you know, if I'm transitioning, you know, and there's even more within that
that's so good. That's exactly it. By the way, I would start with the people who are more likely to buy from you, who are already spent with you. And like, ideally though, you find someone who spends a little bit and there's a lot of wallet share left, meaning they spend a lot more with the competition. And so, yeah, to your point, and of course the greenfields though, like, they're a lot of work and there's a huge upside, but continue on. I totally agree.
And I would just reiterate too, but specific answer aside, the important thing here is that it is totally okay to ask clarification questions. Like, they're going to appreciate the fact that you don't just take things at face value and you really want to understand the entire context before you just say, oh, here's what I do. This works all the time. This is the easiest path to success I found. It's like, if you clarify and you're actually working with the real world, they're going to really appreciate that. And by extension, you know, maybe I won't get too caught up in the outbound example, but ways, you know, it's like, hey, I've exhausted the low hanging fruit. Obviously, there's a lot of things within that, you know, we can attack, and that makes sense to go after first. Now, as I go to outbound, what are some of the most common success plays we see? Are we a great fit to displace a legacy and more competitive vendor? Because if so, I'm going to try and take these 50 accounts and figure out which ones map to that play, that takeout really easily. I'm also going to see if anyone in these greenfield accounts, I'm going to look in our CRM, see if any of them are downloading educational white papers, see if they're looking or attending any of our webinars. And if so, and that's been within the last 3 months, I'm going to really make a point to prioritize those and see if there's still interest, see if there's a real need for them to explore it further and attack it that way, right? And again, I could go, you know, further and further, but asking those clarification questions, even if you're wrong to a manager and maybe they say, well, I see what you're saying, I would potentially do it this way, but I'm not mad with your answer, because how would you know that? I've been here for 3 years and you're interviewing with us, right? And so I think just showing them that you can ask these questions, that you can quickly come up with a well-informed viewpoint, and minimally you'll execute on this and learn quickly, is the most important thing. And I hope through like that in of itself is such a TED Talky thing, but I hope that example actually kind of highlights what that looks like in real time, right? So, yeah.
Thank you for joining Eric's TED Talk, everyone. No, anyway, what you shared is great news for all of us. This is a truth, a principle in sales. You do not need to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, that could hurt you, because the minute you think you know it all, you cut off your potential. You need to be the most curious. So the way you answer that question, you hit on the most important component, is you don't need to know the answers, but you need to be curious and take the time to ask qualifying questions of the hiring manager, and they will really appreciate that. How do you answer? I love this one. The sell me this pen, or will sell me this question, but of course I could ask, sell me this pen. So let's riff on it.
Well, I'm going to be a bit contrarian and say that I don't like that analogy in the context of B2B tech sales. There's never a situation. I've maybe been asked by one CTO kind of sarcastically, like, hey, sell me your solution, right? Tell me why I should buy this. But by the time I had that conversation with them, I had already had 3 calls with their senior solutions architect, and I could relate their specific context to that problem. So we could definitely go through the exercise, and I apologize if that's not the answer you wanted to hear, but just a vanilla, sell me this pen. There's so many things, do we discover how they use pens, how often they use pens, what type of pen they want? There's so many ways you could take it that I apologize, BMC, but I'm going to reject that premise. So,
well, I would say you answered it. And BMC, the only thing I would add, basically expanding on what Eric's saying, is you're not going to get a lot of like crazy curveball questions. You might get those, sell me this book or whatever. Don't freak out, pause, and just ask questions to understand, like, if they have, how they would use whatever, if it's a pen, like how do you typically use a pen? Have you bought a pen before? Like, how much have you invested? Just getting a sense of their actually whether they have a need for a pen or not and how they would use it, and then tying it back to that. Because you also, part of this exercise is disqualifying. What if they're not a good fit for buying a pen? Like, they're not actually really in the market. They don't need it. So that's super high level, but I know Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, you can look on YouTube when he does sell me this pen, and it can apply to many types of things. It's basically take a pause and like kind of evaluate if they actually have a need at the highest level. So if you do that, you don't have to be perfect. Eric, you hit on that point, man. It's like, we don't have to be perfect, especially for an SDR. They just want to see how you think in your process. All you have to do basically is not pitch at them. I think it's that, like, don't pitch like, oh, you should buy it because this, like, ask some questions to qualify.
I'm going to give everyone one question. And it was a question I got. How many windows are in New York City?
20 million. No.
So that's a good guess. It's actually pretty close. But the reason I share that question is because no one knows the answer to that question. You go into an interview cycle not knowing what questions you're going to be asked. So you can prepare to an extent. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your biggest failure. Tell me about our company.
Why do you want to work here?
Why do you want to work here? Yeah, I mean, they're basic questions, but it's the same thing going into a sales cycle. You can prep all your questions out, but all of a sudden it's going to go in a different direction in which these questions you prepared to ask actually won't be as relevant, and you're less likely to ask them, well, tell me about this. Why? You want to go layers deeper. So I wouldn't encourage people to overthink this. I would think more in terms of your specific stories and your experiences and research in the company. But the reason why I say tell me how many windows in New York, most people will start to laugh and giggle and get embarrassed and be like, 100 million, like something random. There is no right answer, but it's to show them how you think on your feet.
Yes.
Actually, as a matter of fact, there's buses in New York, there's taxis, there's cars, there's a lot of apartment buildings. So I'd say it sort of shows how you process, and you can never prepare for a question like that. So the point is, don't overthink what you will say. Go in loose. It's a conversation. You're just having a conversation, so don't worry about specific questions and how you'll respond. Just think more in terms of have a few. What I did was I wrote down 5 specific stories that I had an actual accomplishment. So I could talk about, if they asked me, hey, how do you embody transparency? I'd say, well, this time I did this story and this was the result for it. So I had some stories and I understood everything I could about the company and anything I could about the interviewer. I knew she had a dog named like Brooklyn Bridge, like something random like that.
Tip, by the way, you want to create a personal experience for your interviewer.
I want them to feel. I want them to feel special, and I want to give them everything I can, so it's a no-brainer to advance me in the process. So I was never so worried about the actual questions, but more so worried about just going in loose and having a great interaction.
People buy from and hire people who are confident, relaxed, and also are other oriented. You were focused on creating a good experience for them.
And if you don't have that business acumen, it's something to start thinking about. Well, what are you doing in your free time? Are you watching TikTok videos all day on dancing, or are you watching podcasts like this one that will prepare you? what content are you consuming that then will shape your worldviews and beliefs? And that's also very important as well.
Right now, companies know they have all the leverage, and they're being selective and waiting until they know for sure that the person they're interviewing is the best candidate. So just take that approach into everything you do. Again, it doesn't mean you have to be desperate or try that much harder, but just really prepare yourself. What kinds of questions could they ask me? Practice your story out loud. Make sure your answers are very, concise, succinct, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll cut myself off there because that's one of many things I could get into.
Yeah, good point. Hiring companies have the leverage right now. And like you said, not that you need to be more desperate or put more pressure on yourself, but just be, again, intentional, do the research, put in the preparation, try and become an expert on their business and the product. Not that you have to be super technical, but at least the why customers might choose the product, the company you're applying to. And like you said, practice the questions. I love be succinct. It doesn't have to be the perfect words, but how you answer, with confidence and succinctness. Maybe throw in a nice story and tell it well.
Before the interviews, practice. If you know that you're going to do some form of an exercise, you may not always give information. In my interview processes, we have an exercise where we don't tell you what it is until you get there.
Okay.
But Google sales exercises, anything that you Google, looks like an interview sales exercise. If you do that, the things that Google will tell you and articles that are there will prepare you for what ours is.
And I have a feeling you gave some good insights on different best practices that could be useful in some of these types of exercises. So.
Yes, exactly. 100%. So practice answering questions. Get your friends, get your mom, get your sister, brother, whoever, someone that is willing to spend a half hour on a call with you, and practice ahead of time. That it shakes off the nerves, gets you a little bit ready. Because oftentimes I'll see in interviews, people will be like, "Oh, that's a great question." Yeah. And they say that's a great question after every question we ask them, because they're thinking about what they want to say and trying to think about it. I'm like, okay, you clearly didn't look up. Half of our interview questions are very unique, but the other half are these are questions that everyone in an interview are going to be asking. So you shouldn't need to think about it too hard. People saying "Ooh, that's a great question" once is flattering. Twice, I'm like, cool. I don't know. Maybe we do have really great questions. I don't know. 3 times, I'm like, oh, you're just killing for time while you think about what to say. Versus just being okay, cool. Let me think about that for a moment. Awesome. All right. I'd rather you say that you need a moment to think, and not 5 minutes, but a quick second, than just continue to fake pat our ego on the level of our questions.
How do you think about answering common behavioral questions? And, you might get role-related questions too, oh, how would you prioritize a lead list? I know it's a whole can of worms, but any tips on how you engage and how you respond to questions in interviews?
Yeah. Ask a question in response to a ton of questions. Show that you're seeking to understand what the person is trying to get at by that question. So, give me an example of an interview question that I might get.
Okay. I could give you multiple, but one is, tell me about a time you set a stretch goal and what motivated you to achieve it.
Yeah, totally. So just out of curiosity, when you ask this question, are you trying to kind of understand how I systematize and approach reaching a stretch goal, or more about what blah, blah, blah? You get
what my true motivation is.
Right. But I think people are really impressed when you seek to understand. And then what that avoids too is let's say you asked a question about how do you prioritize a lead list, and you as an interviewee are really just trying to understand how hard of a worker I am. But I take that as I need to demonstrate that I've used LinkedIn Sales Nav before and I know how to operate a spreadsheet. I might go down an entirely wrong rabbit hole.
Yes.
And I didn't really even understand what you're trying to learn from that question.
Mm.
So I think my best interview advice is ask questions in response to questions, seek to understand what they really want to get out of it. Don't do it on every question. That'd get really annoying.
That's a good point. If you overdo it, but it can be a pattern interrupt and a differentiator if you do it on a few.
Totally. And a lot of times you genuinely might be confused by the question. And instead of panicking and being, oh, I need to be a know-it-all and I can't show I'm confused. Ask a question, be hey, I'm just out of curiosity, what made you ask that? Or what are you trying to learn? But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really understand and people admire that.
Yeah, so after my Oracle days, I worked at Google Cloud, and they have general cognitive ability interviews.
Those seem
And
terrifying.
dude, you would
Yeah.
crush it though, because that's the first step is you ask questions to understand the scope of the problem and clarify. I had one question like, imagine you're a dying newspaper company, or there is a dying newspaper company, and you're a private equity firm and buy them out. What do you do? And we don't need to get into it, but basically what you described of clarifying questions, understanding the scope of the problem and situation is very useful for that. So I'm sure you'd crush it if you ever want to go to Google one day. But hey, Gong is a great place to be, you know? So
I'm saying at Gong for so long.
Something that's so disappointing to me about so many interviews that I've done, Chris, is the candidate is completely unprepared to ask me any questions, which is frankly, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like if you are really interested and curious and you're driven to work here, there's got to be something that is top of mind for you. And even if I'm the last stage of the interview and you've already asked the same question to another person on the interview panel, so what? Get a different perspective. Like don't just freeze up and have no questions to ask. So to build a good list of questions, research the company and its financial goals. If you're in a sales role, you are critical to driving revenue. This is true for SDRs. It's of course true for salespeople. So understanding the company's financial position is really important. This is easier to do with a public company where you can look at their stock performance and whatnot, but it's not impossible to do for private companies either. Just Google their company name and funding rounds, and you'll see what kind of money have they raised when, and then read the press releases. In those press releases, the CEO or the chief revenue officer or whoever is going to be quoted to say, what are they going to do with that funding? Expanding internationally, looking at mergers and acquisitions, rolling out a new product line, something like that. Have some perspective on what the company is trying to do, what its strategic initiatives are, and just ask questions about it. And you don't need to have answers to these questions. You just need to ask thoughtful questions. Like, hey, saw that you guys raised $200 million. Very exciting. You're expanding into EMEA. What's that expansion going to be like from an SDR perspective? And ask the SDR director or whoever you're interviewing with, ask them, what is your plan to take what's working in the US and expand it overseas? Just curious. So that's one line that you go down, the company's strategic initiatives. The other one is role performance. I love it when people ask me, like, what's the average quota attainment for people in this role?
Yep.
What do the best SDRs do that the other ones don't? What separates the good from the great? And talk about individual performance in the role. And basically the question you're asking them is, how can I put myself in the best position to be successful here? And the reason that I like that so much is that if you show me that you're already thinking about how to be at the top of the pack, you're instilling confidence in me that you're going to be that type of person who is self-starting, who is motivated, who wants to be that leader on the leaderboard. And then that's a really cool thing.
When you have specific questions, it signals competence. Whether that's true or not can be debated. But people with thoughtful, precise questions come across as more intelligent and as a higher quality person for whatever particular role they're interviewing for, right? Like the worst thing you can do is you get to an end of an interview and a hiring manager says, do you have any questions? And you say, nope, none. That's the worst thing you can do. The second worst thing you can do is you ask like a couple generic questions, right? Like, oh, tell me about the culture here. Like not a horrible question, but like, it's not going to separate you. The best thing you can do is ask very specific questions based on research you did about the company. So like if you're interviewing for like a public company, for example, and you have this data, you could be like, actually, I have a number of questions. I read your most recent earnings report and your CEO said net dollar retention was down by 5 points since the beginning of the year. And I'm not concerned about that because we're in a tough economy, but I just want to get a sense of like, what's your take on why that's happening within the business, right? Like I wouldn't expect like a new SDR to ask that level of a question, but like if you can get at least some of the way there, you can blow a hiring manager's mind just by asking a good question. Some hiring managers, they shouldn't do this, but some hiring managers will hire you just because you asked good questions at the end.
Guys, you just got the answers to the test, a way to blow an interviewer's mind. So make sure to steal this, you know, especially if it's a public company, or at the end of the day, do some deep research and show that thoughtfulness.
Hey, do you have any questions for me? You get this asked at the end of every single interview. And I think that is actually one of the coolest opportunities to demonstrate your skill set as a seller, because your job as a seller, by and large, is to ask really good questions. A lot of people will ask the most generic, off-the-shelf questions ever. Like, what makes a successful SDR? Or like,
What's your culture?
yeah, what's your culture like?
Or looked on the website.
Or like, can I work from home? Like, no,
Oh my gosh.
like, that is an opportunity to show that you can do research and ask a really like well thought, articulate question based on it. So like, listen to these two different questions. Ready? One is, hey, what makes a successful SDR? Generic, bland, anyone can pull that off the shelf. Versus, hey, I was doing research and I noticed on your LinkedIn you posted about how you've helped over 7 SDRs transition to the AE role in the past year. Like, first of all, that's so cool to see, especially as someone who wants that for myself. I'm curious, when you like reverse engineer what made those 7 reps so successful in the SDR role that set them up for success as AEs, what were some of the commonalities or the trends that you saw? That's the same question. It's like, what made them good SDRs? But it's demonstrating you did research. You went a layer deeper than most people. It's demonstrating that you're already thinking about your next role. Like, that question will stand out so much in an interview. And you can do that with all the questions you ask. Like, find a piece of research, show that you put in the work and that you care, and then layer that into your question. And people will remember that.
What a nuanced, powerful question right there. I'd be like, this person has acumen. He means business. He wants to be here.
Totally, dude. Like, you're showing the way you're going to show up on a call in the interview.
Another way you demonstrate preparation is when it gets time, do you have any questions for me? Don't be the candidate that's like, nope, I'm good. Like, you can tell them, like, you want to have, I'd say, like 5 prepared in advance. Realistically, a couple might get answered during the interview, and you can tell them that, because you don't always have time to ask 5 questions too. But in the end, you're probably gonna have time for like 3 questions generally. And I think the types of questions you ask also demonstrate your level of preparation and how you'll prepare for cold calls or customer calls. So I'm trying to think of good questions I would ask. Like, I would ask questions like, what do you need most on your team, and what are you specifically working for? Another one I like is, you can tell them like about what you've been doing to prepare for the role. So start telling, I've been doing this, doing these trainings, I've read these books. What else? Or then you can ask like, what else can I be doing to ensure I ramp up quickly once I get into role? So rather than just saying, what else should I be doing to prepare for the role? Like, start off with, here's what I've been doing. Did I miss anything, essentially? And it's like an extra way you can weave in and almost show off a little bit, even though that's not the intention, but show like, here's what I've been doing to prepare. What else would you recommend? And then another one I like is just, what are the commonalities you see in successful SDRs you've managed? And be clear on, like, you're half interviewing them too. You want to make sure you're working for a good manager. Can they communicate what makes a successful SDR? Those are 3 off the top of my head that I think, but at a high level, yes, the questions you prepare will say a lot. Don't be the candidate with no questions. And then, at the end, your last question can be closing them. And say like, I guess my last question is based on our discussion today. Do you think I would be a good fit for the SDR role at X company? And just a lot of managers, if you've nailed the interview, they'll just tell you right there. Like,
I like how simple that is, man. You've really, in this conversation, simplified the process. I think eliminated a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is a sales term we use. And your questions are great. Like, we're cut from a similar cloth, it's, I think, the same way. And you asked a question that showed a curiosity to contribute to the manager. Like, what do you need on your team? Going back to your point, you gave us empathy that you were managing a huge team and you wanted people that could come in and maybe support you in like leading others. And so maybe you would mention that.
And another purpose to that question too is, based on their answer, you can then give them certainty that that's what you'll bring. So for example, if they're like, I'm looking for people who are going to grind and hit the phones hard, you can be like, that's exactly what I'm looking to come in here and do. I want to show up early. I want to stay late. I'm big on work ethic, and address whatever. Or if they say, I'm looking for people who are not only going to succeed in the role, but are going to help the other members of my team. I got a lot on my plate and I'm always looking for, and you can just say like, yep, that's exactly what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to ramp up as quickly as possible. And I'm the type of person who thinks there's room for everyone to succeed. I'm not one of these people who hides what's been working for me. If something's been working, I'm going to share it and make sure the rest of the team is succeeding as well. Like whatever they give you, just take it and run with it. And it's, again, you're signaling, this is what I'm going to do on calls. Cause that's very similar to what you do when you're on calls with customers, or you're on cold calls and you're going back and forth, and you want to show that you can respond to what they're giving you.
You also brought out what I call a double-edged question. I don't have a trademark on it, but it's a question that shows your preparation and acumen while also gathering helpful information. So like one example is like, I noticed this like new product release, maybe it's a startup or something. I'm curious, how is this shaping like the go-to-market strategy for the SDR org? Or this is how, like your question, it's coming back to me now. This is how I prepared for this role. What else can I be doing? I read about the culture and it looks like diversity and inclusion is important. That's important to me. What else do you love about the culture? Instead of like, oh, what's your culture? And so to your point, it's like, I love that. Again, cut from the same cloth. It's like questions that they're an opportunity to show you did the homework, you know?
Yep.
You had mentioned in your talk, I believe, in South by Southwest, bringing great questions.
Great questions.
Great questions. Talk about that.
Come prepared with questions from, especially if you're an SDR, like who's our target? Who's the target persona? Who are we selling into? Some BDRs are not just pipeline generations. You're just not, making sales qualified meetings or setting up demos for a sales rep. You might actually be the one doing the demo. Like how in depth of a role are you having your SDRs go? Do they get to do demos? Are they part of the sales team? Find out if a BDR is actually paired one-on-one. And if so, how does that work? Are you part of a sales group? Are you part of a sales pod? Are you just generating leads? Also, who's your competition? That's always a great question for salespeople to ask. Who are we competing against? Stuff like that, because, and even when you say that, it's just like, I saw that we've got, and always use we, assumptive close. You say we a lot and we assume that you're already putting yourself in our shoes.
Oh my gosh, I do that all the time.
All the time.
And that's
it
a subtle
works.
thing, and it's good to hear that validated.
It actually, because we hear we, and it's a buying signal. So you hear we, and we're like, alrighty, they're already thinking they're in this. They're already thinking about us, the big picture, the growth of the company, how they can contribute. We love to hear that type of we. But if you sit there and go, okay, I see that our competitors are this. Am I missing anybody? Shows that you've done research.
That's great.
Stuff like that. We need to see that, because if you come and you're like, hey, do you have any questions for me? And you're like, no. I've never known a salesperson that didn't have questions. So if you're a salesperson and you don't have questions, that's a huge red flag for us in recruiting.
The person getting hired right now is not the person that says the best answer. It's the person that I feel like, yes, there's an element of that. Like you definitely have to, answer things well. But if I'm taking like a super polished person who is saying all the right things, but I question 6 to 12 months from now, if they're really going to be able to deal with the day-to-day of making 50 dials a day, getting hung up on all of these different things. Like, I think again, there's so many nuances, and I don't want to make it any more complicated than it needs to be, but shifting that mindset away from having the perfect answer to creating a very compelling story as to why 12 months from now, you're going to be the top performer in their department. And to your point, a great means or a great feature of that is asking great questions, whether it's related to, again, I tie a lot of questions into the story that you have. So like, as an example, in my case, like, hey, I have an engineering background. I've been a part of sales cycles from that engineering side, and I know the limits that technical knowledge has. What kind of training, or have you hired someone with an engineering background before? And what are some of the biggest hurdles they had to overcome? Because that's what I want to prioritize when I step into this role.
What I did when I got my job at Google is I did a 90-day plan, 30, 60, 90. And they're like, what's this? It was just another way to go above and beyond. So there's probably other ways to do it, but that's the take home message right there. And that only happens, we're only willing to do that if we know we want to work at the company we're reaching out to.
And I have a little quote to share real quick that I happen to have that I looked at the other day. It's by Lou Vickery. It says, 4 short words sum up what has lifted most successful individuals above the crowd. A little bit more. They did all that was expected of them and a little bit more. So, I feel like this is one of those examples. I've seen, this girl, Ren Hawthorne. I don't know if you've seen her on LinkedIn, but she got into tech sales in 2 weeks, and I interviewed her as someone who She came from a background, I think she wrote music for Chris Brown, which is pretty cool. And she has like a life coaching certification.
Yeah.
So she's a pretty magnetic person. But she put together a cold call script as well for Zoom info. So, it's not needed, right? But there are ways to go above and beyond. So,
if I could add anything too, I think it's read the room, right? If you're going to a super large company, they have a very regimented process. I don't want to get pigeonholed or focused on one specific example, but maybe a 30, 60, 90 could almost be too much, like almost trying too hard, right? Whereas the flip side, maybe if you come to a high growth startup, obviously maybe they're not getting as many applicants as like a Google of the world, right? But if you show up in that final round and you have a 30, 60, 90 when it's unexpected, but you could tell based on your interactions up to that point that manager would appreciate that, now you're really in a position to blow them away. In the example you provided, maybe for Ren, the appropriate thing was a call script, right? And it really sets you apart. So I would just say there's no one answer. Really read the room and find the balance of being over prepared as opposed to like, again, this is an extreme example, but being too desperate or like, please look at me, like I need this job. Look at my 30, 60, 90. It's like, we don't care. Like, so
that is such a good point.
Yeah.
Because for me, my thing has always been go above and beyond, be extremely passionate, but on the flip side, you do need to read the room.
I've interviewed nearly 1,000 sales professionals at this point in my career. And people who would end an interview with an open loop, like didn't ask for next steps, that was like kind of a ding against them, right? It doesn't mean I wouldn't it was not, I'm not going to hire you now, but it wasn't going for them. Like I would think about that. They didn't ask for the next step. If they're not asking for next steps with me, are they going to ask with customers? Because I need them to do that with customers.
Ooh. That is a red flag. If someone is coming into an interview for a closing role and they don't, ask for next steps, and there you have it, guys, from a sales leader himself.
One of the things I would do in the first interview is I would make sure I'm asking the question, what kind of challenge is going on in the business that's making you hire this person to begin with? Because now you understand what's motivating them to make the hire. And right, if you're trying to land an SDR job, they might say something like, well, we have a pipeline generation target to hit, and we need a certain number of people in place to be able to hit that, and we're behind on our hiring plans. So we might miss our number, right? Like in a perfect world, that's what they say. And so if I'm following up and I haven't heard back, and I give them a call, I'll say, hey, last we talked, it sounded like you were slightly behind on your SDR hiring plans. It felt like our conversation went well. And so I just want to make sure I'm taking the next step with you to solve that pipeline generation problem. Now, that's what it might sound like. You could do the same thing via email. A better version, though, would just be you locking down next steps while you're in the existing interview. And by the way, most sales leaders are going to be very impressed with that.
Yes.
If you do it tactfully, right? Like if you get to an end of an interview and you're like a new SDR or somebody trying to break into tech or whatever, and you say, I have some ideas for what next steps could be, but you obviously have a hiring process. So before I give you my opinion, what do you think we should be doing next here? And then they'll tell you, and then you try to get it scheduled on the spot. That's what I would do.
At the end of the interview, I think that this is important. It's just like a sales cycle. Most people say, oh, great, thanks so much. I look forward to hearing from you. And then 2 weeks later, they're sitting there scratching their head, wondering, did I pass? I haven't applied to anyone new because I really want that one. It's all about progression. So you ask them, look, really great. I really enjoyed our conversation today. What are next steps in your candidate process? You ask them that, and they're going to say, well, we're going to go back and we're going to review and talk as a team. Fantastic. Well, I'm really curious. How do you think I did today? Like what feedback would you share internally based on how you think I did today? Point blank, ask them that. Do you have any hesitations or concerns as to why I would not advance in your process? And you don't want to be too pushy here, but you want to call out the red flags. Understand, hey, Trent, well, I think he did a great job today, but I am concerned about the experience thing. Okay, so can you tell me more about why it is so important for the experience for this role? So start to understand if they have an objection as to why you wouldn't move forward, you need to call that out. You need to call that out and understand it so you can give yourself a chance to overcome it. And then you progress to the next person in the interview process. The interview will be slightly different. Yeah, when do you expect for me to hear back from you? Because there's nothing worse than sitting there in a place of no man's land, of not knowing what to expect or having clarity. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So push them, and they're going to say, well, I'll get back to you in a week. Okay, well, if I don't hear back from you by Monday, I'm going to send you an email, or better yet, I'll give you a call.
Yeah.
I'll shoot you a text. Something like that, and like assume you already have the job. That's how I always do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of reps that just they don't realize that. They just end the interview and
Oh man.
yeah, they wait for you to tell them what the next steps are.
Damn, that's like literally your job is to pin down next steps on the call, on the cold
That's
call.
what I'm saying. You don't need to over stress about it. If you nail the basics, you're going to put yourself above a lot of candidates. And then the last thing I would say is follow up afterwards to thank them, share what you took away from the conversation, like show that you were listening and recap, like, here's what I've learned, re-emphasize, here's why I'm a good fit. You can hit on those, like working hard, I'm coachable, and I want to add value to your whole team and organization. Doesn't need to be anything fancy, but again, a follow-up is just another way to stand out because a lot of candidates leave it out.
This is definitely a role where like we want to see you close us. And a close is not, do you have any hesitations about offering me the job? I could say yes, and I don't really owe you anything else if I feel like there are hesitations. I could say no because there aren't, but you're not really gaining anything. I could say no because I don't really want to tell you why I'm not going to hire you right now, because like for my own like security and safety, I probably shouldn't in this moment. But so often I hear that, it's like, do you have any hesitations for giving me the job? And they think that that's a close. I'm currently like working on one that like is good for me. But I think just basically like asking for the job, like, hey, I would like this job. I would like to know anything that like I can work on to make me a more worthy candidate. I'm really hungry about getting it. I've learned so much about your company. What do I need to do to earn this spot? That's a close.
It's always very simple. It's just like, have you heard anything today that concerns you or do you think would prevent me from moving forward? You know, again, it's an assumptive close. You're just like, hey, I'm really excited to come on board. What's the next step? Either of those
I love
will work.
that. That's so simple.
Either of those will work.
Your confidence right there, by the way, composed, good tone, and you're direct.
Because when they say that, you're just like, oh, okay, well, let's go ahead and do this now then. I was going to wait a couple of days, but yeah, we'll get you scheduled.
Yeah, or even like, you know, I really want this job. I'm ready to move forward. How can I earn this opportunity?
Yep, based on everything that we've talked about today, I am even more geeky about the role.
I love that.
So ready to get started.
I love that passion.
Yeah.
Everyone knows you got to send a follow-up email after an interview, right?
Yeah.
Most people do it end of day. I've always done that in the past too.
That's actually what I do. So I'm curious where you're going with
So get
this.
ready. I didn't think about this. And what's cool is like Adam was a killer account executive at Gong, like absolute murderer. And now he's crushing it as like an AE leader.
Wow.
So he's on the interviewee side of things now.
Yep.
And I never thought about this, but he's like, I typically have to give feedback on a candidate within an hour of that interview ending.
Oh.
And that follow-up email has a chance to impact the way he views an applicant. So he's like, send that thing right away. Summarize what you talked about, express your interest, like double down on why you think you'd be a good fit. You better send that thing within like 15 minutes of that interview ending, because that might impact his feedback, and he might have to submit that feedback on you as a candidate within like an hour. That end of day email you send might not even get there in time to influence the outcome.
So think about the reality of the hiring manager's life, right? If you're trying to break into tech sales, let me make you aware of what the hiring managers go through. They probably wake up at 6 or 7 a.m. every day with their Slack lit up like a Christmas tree.
Oh, yeah.
And hundreds of emails and meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if you don't follow up, they've forgotten about you. Not because you're a bad person or because you don't have what it takes or anything like that. They've just forgotten because they've been bombarded by everything else. And so when I first got my first ever SDR job, which started at InsideSales.com, I didn't have a degree.
Yep.
I don't even remember how I landed the interview, but I had to keep following up with the recruiter. You would think even like a recruiter would follow up with me because she's trying to place people, and there would never be next steps at the end of it. So I would call and I would call and I was tactful, right? I wasn't like obnoxious about it. And I noticed a lot of people in the comments on that post were like kind of haranguing me about like, oh, Chris, like hiring managers would get annoyed if you followed up too much. Bullshit. Like, just like frankly speaking, that's such utter bullshit to me. And if a hiring manager did get, I'm sure some of them would get annoyed, but like, again, Slack lit up like a Christmas tree, hundreds of emails, all this stuff. If you don't follow up, you're going to be forgotten. You should be willing to offend people because you followed up a little bit too much. That's not that big of a deal. Like, this is just sales. Is like, there's this guy named Dan Kennedy, who's like the godfather of direct response marketing. And I want to be careful about saying this, right? Like, everybody listening, don't take this too seriously. But he says, if you haven't offended somebody by noon each day, you're not marketing hard enough. Well, I think most people would take that too far. And I don't think it's great advice. It does have some wisdom in it, in that, like, if you're not following up enough with the people who have what you want, to the point where every now and then somebody gets kind of annoyed with you, you're probably not pushing the envelope hard enough. That's my belief. If other people don't want to believe it, that's their prerogative, but it's helped me.
I think your goal should be to have multiple offers from multiple companies, because it creates a sense of urgency with the company you're interviewing with when you're like, hey, by the way, I have an interview, or I have an offer on the table from this other company, and I need to let them know in the next couple of weeks. Like, all of a sudden you're going to get through that hiring process way faster if they like you and they like what you have to offer. And I think leverage is always really important. So if you land your dream interview, don't put all your eggs in that basket. Go find 3 other offers. It'll put you in a really strong position of leverage that shows up in a bunch of different ways.
Do you have any thoughts on how to tactfully speak to your other offers where you're not like ruffling feathers too much? Because can't people like be a little too aggressive with it? I don't know. I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, dude, I think this shows up in everything I do. I'm just like very authentic. So I'd be like, hey, I want to be fully transparent with you. I'm really excited about this opportunity and I'm really interested in working here. I do want to let you know it's really important for me to land a job. Like, I need to get into tech sales. And I have these 2 other offers that I'm also excited about. And there's a timeline on them. I wanted to make you aware of that because I'd love to see if there's an opportunity for us to work together, but I do need to be cognizant of these other opportunities. Like, that's the truth.
Boom.
It's authentic. Like, I think people overthink things sometimes. Just like, tell the truth. Be authentic. People understand. People have probably been in that spot themselves before. So I don't think there's like a witchcraft or wizardry or like specific messaging.
What's funny is that was phrased really well, though. I'm an analytical mind, and I just loved how you phrased that, but it was authentic at the end of the day. And just tell the truth.
It's just the truth. Be like,
yeah,
I want to work here, but I need to pick a job and only have 2 weeks to let the other company know if I'm going to work there. Like, that's it. You can phrase it however you want, but that's the reality of it.
Guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button, share it with more people who could benefit from the message, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more videos like these designed to help you launch your tech sales career. Also, feel welcome to poke around the channel to go deeper on the individual interviews that I had with people like Kyle Coleman, Chris Orlob, Kaylin Wright, Connor Murray, and everyone else featured in this video. And if you want to get the answers to the tech sales interview test, specifically when interviewing for an SDR role, check out my video on 30 interview questions you need to prepare for to ace your tech sales interviews. I'm proud to say there are people that have reached out to me in response to this video alone, saying it helped them land a great job in tech sales. And finally, if you guys are serious about breaking into tech sales and launching your 6-figure tech sales career in the next 12 weeks, then check out my collection of courses, Tech Sales Accelerator, linked in the description of this video. I've got a self-paced option with 12 hours of video content and 8 courses that'll give you everything you need if you're a self-starter. And I've also got a white glove experience option where you can work directly with me doing one-on-one coaching as I guide you through the 12-week program. If you want to understand if the program's a good fit for you or not, I'm happy to talk with you directly. Just book time through my Calendly link linked in the description of this video, and we can hop on a discovery call. Thanks for showing up and being a part of this community and investing in your personal and professional development to your success in tech sales and in life. Happy selling and happy living, and we'll see you in the next one.